I welcome everyone to the May budget meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM moderator. As all members have received a copy of the call for tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our April meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. We do have one proposed change to the minutes. In the attendance paragraph, there was a typo. There were 2 absent members from District 6, not 7. So that change has been made. District 7 was listed as having perfect attendance, which was correct. Are there any other proposed changes to the minutes of our April 19 meeting? Hearing none, the minutes as amended stand adopted upon unanimous consent. That brings us to the first of the 3 items on our call. Kip Bergweger, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM and guests, resolved that the meeting of the RTM on Monday, May 10, 2021, if the business of the meeting has not been concluded by 12 midnight, the meeting shall adjourn at that time to meet again on Tuesday, May 11, 2021 at 7:00 p.m. via Zoom webinar.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 1 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Bergweger, you have anything to add?
Well, as we all know, as we know, items 1 and 2 are standard resolutions that are adopted each year for the budget meeting. On item 1, there was little discussion by the Legislative and Rules Committee, and the votes on legal order and the merits were 10-0-0 with districts 2 and 7 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 1. Is there any objection to the adoption of item 1? If there is, we will take a vote. Anyone who objects, notify your district representative who is a panelist and can alert us. I hear no objection, so item 1 may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Mr. Bergweger, item 2.
Item 2 is a resolution that the RTM traditionally adopts to limit the time for committees to give their reports and for speakers speaking on a motion to affecting the budget. The item is as it appears on the call.
All right. Reports of our committees that considered it. Mr. Bergweger.
The Legislative Rules Committee met on May 3, 2021. All districts were present except districts 2 and 7 were absent for items 1 and 2. We were helped by Karen Fasiliotis and Beth Krummick of the BET and by Amina Ahmad, the Assistant Town Attorney, all of whom were present for the entire meeting, and by Leslie Tarkenton of the BET, who joined later in the meeting. Item 2 is traditionally adopted, but we had this time around, we had a lot of questions and comments that came up. One committee member said that RTM members are fiduciaries and there should be no time limits. Other committee members debated giving all committees 10 minutes to report. Some committee members remarked that all committees are important and asked why some should be limited more than others. Other committee members argued that we should limit all reports to 7 minutes. Then there was then a motion to amend this item by limiting reports for all committees to 7 minutes. The motion failed by a vote of 5-0 with districts 2 and 7 absent. There then followed a debate about the speaking order of proponents and opponents, that perhaps one should immediately follow the other, or that the proponent and principal opponent should speak consecutively. The delegate from District 1 made a motion to amend item 2 to require the principal proponent and opponent of a motion to speak first on the motion before any other speakers? Um, The vote on the amendment was 9-1-0 with District 8 voting no because the moderator was not present to be heard on this question. Now, the vote on item 2 as amended was 10-0-0 on both legal order and the motions, on the merits. I cannot offer the amendment now or later whenever it's appropriate. And I suspect that there will be a discussion of pros and cons following this motion.
Well, we had a speaker sign up list and we've had two people sign up, so that will be our discussion.
Okay,
Now would be the appropriate time.
okay, the motion to amend is this. In the third line, after the words shall be, insert the words the first speakers to speak and shall be, so that the item will read, resolved that the time to speak at the May RTM shall be limited to 3 minutes per speaker for each motion, except that the proponent and principal opponent for the motion, the latter to be determined by the moderator, shall be the first speakers to speak and shall be entitled to speak for 10 minutes each. Committee reports shall be limited to 7 minutes each, except for education and finance. The Education and Finance Committee reports shall be limited to 10 minutes each.
All right, that is a motion to amend offered on behalf of one of our committees and does not require a second. Discussion on that motion to amend. Brian Rainey, District 9.
Yeah, this seemed like a straightforward thing at LNR. I appreciate that we received some counter feedback to that, but I don't think that setting aside time, especially given our sign-up sheets and the way we've been doing things on Zoom, that this is in any way prejudicial to anyone speaking.
Kip Bergwager.
Well, Mr. Moderator, we had asked if Bill Lewis from District 1 could be the principal proponent. Would you recognize him to give the
Well, there's
merits?
no such thing as a principal proponent.
Well, the proponent.
There is a proponent, which is the committee. And you are the chair of the committee, and you signed up. So would you like to speak? No one else signed up.
No, I think I will pass on it.
All right. We'll take a vote on this. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend item 2 by requiring the principal opponent who, and this rule was designed to protect department heads from facing a surprise motion to cut their budget. And the chair would use discretion as to whether to allow them time to compose their thoughts, or whether this rule now would require them to immediately get up and speak. If you are in favor of that hard and fast rule, you should vote yes on the motion to amend item 2. If you want to allow the chair to exercise discretion as to when a department head is required to speak, you should vote no. So I ask that we'll take a record vote. Will the district tabulators please proceed to poll your delegation? All right, we need to await the results of this vote, so I ask the district tabulators to try and expedite things. So although the 5 minutes has expired, we cannot proceed until we have the result of this. All right, we have the result of the vote on the Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend item 2. Those in favor, 48, opposed 125, abstaining 28. Motion to amend has failed. We'll now take a vote on item 2. And again, we can adopt this upon unanimous consent. Is there any objection to item number 2? If there is, I ask that you contact your district representative, who would then let us know, and then we'll take a vote. I hear no objection. So item 2 may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Now I ask your indulgence. I thank, before we open the meeting, I did thank those who braved the elements outside to join us inside. And you might be aware that there was a union gathering outside Central Middle School involving the Teamsters. And what they did was they got here beginning at 5 o'clock and took virtually every parking space. And most of the cars were from New York, so we're not sure they were even town employees. But some people who came just stopped outside briefly and walked in and said they were going home because it was just too hectic to get in. So I'm going to use that as an excuse for why I forgot to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would all join me now, let's rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now, for the purpose of gathering tonight, we reach item number 3, and I call upon the chairman of the BET, Michael Mason, to present that item.
Good evening. Thank you, Kim. Was that a hint?
No, that was a hint to me.
Oh.
No cooties. We don't want any cooties.
Good evening, everyone. Item number 3 is an act for upon the appropriations recommended by the Board of Estimate Taxation for the expenses and the conduct of the affairs of the town of Greenwich, Connecticut, for the fiscal year July 2021-22, beginning July 1, 2021, and ending June 30th, 2022. The item is exactly as it appears on your call.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 3 has been moved and seconded. Michael Mason with his budget message.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much, members, guests. The past year has had many challenges for the BET and for the RTM. This COVID pandemic put a halt to in-person meetings, and we're all forced to adapt a new meeting platform. We call it Zoom. This meeting is the first time that BET is having people back for their budget meeting in this hybrid form. Hope it's the last. Hope we can get back to normal. The BET hopes to get back to live meetings and normal in the near future as this pandemic becomes history as well. Tonight, the RTM will be deliberating on a budget was submitted to you by the Board of Estimate Taxation for fiscal 22. Unlike past budget, this budget delivered by the BET was significantly above the BET's unanimously approved budget guidelines, which created some definite discussions. The budget deferred, did not cancel any capital projects for both the town and schools, while others are moving forward. The BET submitted to you a budget that was a result of many, many months of deliberations. Some issues have been moved to future budgets for discussions. The BET has recommended funding for the anticipated town operating and Board of Ed operating expenses, including all fixed charges. There's also been an accounting change this year, which has taken items that were typically in our capital budget and moved them into the operating budget. And there's a message in the budget that will explain that for you. I would be remiss at this time not to thank all of the department heads in the town, the Board of Ed, for their help and meetings and getting us material. It's just, it's amazing. Without their help, we wouldn't be able to do that. Our finance team in the finance department, led by our controller, Peter Minarski, and budget director, Roland Geiger. There's no doubt it's every year that they get the awards from the state for the audit and reporting. It's just amazing. The town is very lucky to have them, and we're thankful. And to my fellow BET members, I want to thank all of you for your service, especially during the pandemic. It's been a very difficult go, moving meetings, scheduling, getting Zoom. It's been quite a challenge, and I appreciate everybody's patience and commitment. And hopefully when we get out of this, we can return to some type of normalcy. And we're here tonight for any questions that you may have, and I look forward to your deliberations, and thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. We'll now hear the reports of the committees on the budget. I remind everyone that we have adopted a limit on debate. We have education and finance that will be allowed 10 minutes. Don't have to use all 10. All other committees will speak for a maximum of 7 minutes. So Kimberly Blank, Chair of our Education Committee.
Thank you. Your Education Committee met on Monday, May 3rd via Zoom. We considered and voted on item 3, the fiscal year 22 budget. Representatives of the Board of Ed and BET, including Dr. Jones, Sean O'Keefe, Peter Bernstein, Kathleen Stowe, Michael Mason, Leslie Moriarty, were there to present to the committee and respond to questions. Brian Peldunas, President of PTA Council, also spoke to the committee in favor of passing this year's budget, although he expressed concerns about cuts to the budget made during the BET process. The Education Committee reviewed and voted on over $215 million in operating and capital appropriations for 7 different departments. Our budget coverage process runs from November to May. Beginning in November, we hear from the Board of Ed regarding the superintendent's proposed budget and follow the process as it is approved and submitted to the BET. At our March meeting, we heard a presentation from the Board of Ed on the proposed operating and capital budgets. At our April meeting, we heard budget presentations from Greenwich Library, the Perrott Library, the Bruce Museum, DPW, and Parks and Recreation. Carolyn Baisley of the Department of Health submitted a written report to the committee about the budget for the dental hygienist program. In addition, members of the Education Committee serve as liaisons with individual schools and departments. As liaisons, they meet with building principals and department heads to discuss their budgets and submit written reports to the committee. These liaison reports are compiled and posted to the Education Committee website if you'd like to read them. The committee voted unanimously to support all operating and capital appropriations for the non-Board of Ed departments that we cover. These are the libraries, the Bruce, and portions of DPW, Department of Health, and Parks and Rec. All of their operating budgets were in line or below BET guidance or had de minimis dollar increases. Among the capital projects approved is a $10 million capital appropriation to DPW for remediation work at the Greenwich High School fields. The project is projected to cost $24 million over the next 3 years, in addition to the $4 million spent over the previous 3 years. In addition, Greenwich Library will receive $970,000 to fund structural steel restoration and parking lot improvements. The bulk of our presentation and discussion, of course, surrounded the school's budget. The school's operating budget is $171.8 million. This includes $2 million that the BET decided to move from capital to the operating budget for cybersecurity and digital learning devices. Excluding this $2 million adjustment, the Board of Ed budget is approximately $900,000 above the BET guidelines. The superintendent and Board of Ed explained that this amount was already reduced from the superintendent's initial submission to the Board of Ed, and they believed that an above guidelines budget was necessary to meet the needs of the district. The bulk of this additional increase comes from funding special education expenses, including out-of-district tuitions and settlements. The budget also includes funding for textbooks, including a new K-8 math program, library books and supplies, all of which had been cut as part of last year's budget. The capital budget for the schools is $15.5 million. Of that, about $12.5 million is for maintenance and about $3 million is for major projects. The largest maintenance projects are 4 separate HVAC projects totaling $7 million, and the largest major project is $2.8 million for construction of the new security vestibule or entrance at Greenwich High School. The Board of Ed had initially proposed a capital budget of $32.1 million. The BET cuts to that budget did not affect the maintenance requests. The BET did cut $17.4 million in funding for major projects. The largest cut was $8 million in funding for field remediation at Western Middle School. Members of the BET said that they declined to fund this as part of the budget because there is still no accepted remediation plan with DEEP. They indicated that they will be willing to consider an interim appropriation as soon as there are firmer plans for this work and will not let budget cycles delay the long-awaited resolution of this problem. The BET also cut $4.8 million for Cardinal Field improvements. This funding was to fund the construction of Phase 2 at Cardinal Stadium. As there are no firm plans yet for Phase 2, the BET declined to fund it until there is more information. The Board of Ed has funding from previous years to continue moving forward on design work for this project. The committee spent the most time discussing the BET's decision to cut funding on 2 additional capital projects. The first was a request for $100,000 to do feasibility work on Central Middle School. According to the Board of Ed's Facilities Master Plan, CMS is the only school that was recommended to be fully replaced rather than renovated. The work on this is not scheduled to start for a decade. Over that time, the Board of Ed anticipates that Central Middle will require significant investment of maintenance funds to keep the building in working order. This funding request was to gain a greater understanding of the state of the building and to evaluate the need and wisdom of spending these maintenance funds on a school that will soon be replaced. The BET voted 7-6 to delete these funds, saying that the request was too vague as to its intent and asking the Board of Ed to first clarify its plans regarding which order it plans to address various school buildings. Many members of our committee disagreed with this decision, believing that this $100,000 would be money well spent to help the Board of Ed assess the state of Central Middle School and evaluate their timing request. The second capital issue that the committee focused on was the BET's decision to cut the funding for design work for Julian Curtis from $1.7 million to $200,000. This decision was also made by a 7-6 vote of the BET. They were concerned that the educational specifications put forward by the Board of Ed were overscaled given enrollment projections for the school and asked that the Board of Ed go back to reevaluate these ed specs before they fund further work. At our meeting, the chair of the BET indicated that the BET might be willing to consider an interim appropriation once the ed specs are reconsidered. Several members of the committee objected to the BET's decision to make this cut, saying that the Board of Ed has the responsibility to develop educational specifications. They view this cut as the BET inappropriately inserting itself in the ed spec process. Members raised concerns that this project will now be delayed and will cause other projects such as Old Greenwich, Riverside, and Central Middle School to be delayed. Many members are concerned about the aging and poor state of our school infrastructure, as evidenced by the recent ceiling collapse at North Mianus School. They are concerned that the BET does not have a need to address these plans in a timely fashion. Does not have a plan to address these needs in a timely fashion. Some members pointed out that this timing issue is not simply a matter of funding, but also of administrative capacity and logistics, as it may be difficult to simultaneously manage multiple projects and the accompanying displacement of students. Our committee voted in favor of the school operating budget with a vote of 11-1-0. District 6 voted no. The no vote said that she doesn't believe that this budget meets the needs of the Board of Ed, noting that they have made many cuts in order to meet the guidelines. In particular, she pointed to concerns about the shifting of administrative positions, coordinators, and math coaches. Other members of the committee were supportive of the budget, as the BET fully funded the Board of Ed's request. Still, some shared District 6's concerns about the long-term sustainability of the cuts that have been made in order to get closer to the budget guidelines. Our committee also voted in favor of the school capital budget, but with a heavily divided vote of 6-5-1. Districts 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, and 9 voted in favor. Districts 3, 5, 6, 11, and 12 voted against. District 10 abstained. Those who voted against the capital budget did so symbolically to show their opposition to what they believe is underfunding of the capital needs of our schools. In particular, members disagreed with the decision to cut funding for the Julian Curtis project and the CMS feasibility work. They believe that there is a process by which the Board of Ed is charged with determining the building priorities and needs, and that the BET is improperly substituting its judgment for the Board of Ed's. Members also spoke about the need for the Board of Education and the BET to work together to clarify data used to make these decisions. In particular, there are competing sets of information regarding building capacity and enrollment projections. They believe that it is important that we all work from an agreed upon common fact base. On the school lunch revolving fund, our committee voted 11-0-1 in favor, with District 9 abstaining. The delegate from District 9 said that based on her independent assessment of the school lunch program, she does not believe it is financially managed appropriately and cannot vote in favor of it. We voted 12-0-0 in support of the budget resolutions for the schools and libraries and for the borrowing authorization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will continue with the second committee report that is allotted 10 minutes, and then we'll start in alphabetical order with the remaining committees. So Brooks Harris, Vice Chair of our Finance Committee.
Am I addressing the amendments as well, or just the committee report at this point?
If you want to come back up when we take up the motions to amend, you may do that.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
It's up to you, however you want.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. We met to discuss the budget, the operating and the capital budget, although we focused primarily on the capital budget. A little bit later in the evening, we'll have something to say about 4 of the items that are coming up for vote. But in summary, earlier this year, there was a movement to make sure that the Finance Committee spent adequate time on capital budget and reviewing it. We indeed did that, and we invited people to a presentation on that. And the main things that came out of that were just encouraging people to consider the long-term capital plan as well as the short-term capital plan. And for those of you who looked at the long-term capital plan, I'm sure you see that even though there's a bit of concern about our level of spending, certain projects that we want to fund that aren't being funded, nevertheless, the long-term capital plan shows dramatic increases in mill rate and debt. And so as we consider the capital projects, we encourage people to actually look at that and see how that fits in. In addition to the capital budget, which we spoke at some length on in our presentation, we also were responsible for reviewing some of the operating budgets, such as the finance department of the town. Mike Basham, who's not here in person tonight, did quite a bit of work on that and concluded there was nothing that we intended to challenge this year. And I will be back when we discuss specific amendments to the budget later this evening. Thank you.
It's an example of Doppler effect. All right. Bob McKnight is Chair of our Appointments Committee. Mr. McKnight, do you care to report anything? I'm sorry?
Yes, thank you, Tom. No, Appointments Committee has nothing to report at this time.
Thank you very much. Lucia Jansen, Chair of our Budget Overview Committee. I got it.
Good evening. Before I share my remarks, may I say that it is good to see face to face some of you, my neighbors, my colleagues, and this wonderful RTM body. I also want to thank Moderator Byrne, Moderator Pro Tem Bulgaris, and Assistant Town Clerk Kim Spazzano, and the entire IT team for their leadership throughout the year, coordinating the number of issues with these Zoom hybrid meetings. Your budget overview committee's
You just
role.
got an extra 2 minutes.
Your budget overview committee's role with the town budget is to be a resource on the budget process and the current financial budget proposed by the BET. To that end, last year, in fact, we inaugurated an entirely new education effort describing in detail the month-by-month town budget process. We emphasize it is a year-long budget process with the Board of Ed, BET, and First Selectman beginning almost immediately after the current budget is signed off in May, when the BET sets the mill rate. As we also described, the RTM is the last stop in the budget process. By the way, for those unfamiliar, the RTMs in other parts of the state, such as Darien and the town of Fairfield, have similar processes and authority as we do in Greenwich. In October 2020, as is customary every year, the BET, in a bipartisan approach, discussed and analyzed the fiscal year 22 town and Board of Ed operating and capital spending guidelines. After some minor modifications on the operating side and raising the capital limit from 40 million to 55 million, a compromise was reached, and the BET budget guidelines were passed unanimously, 12-0-0. The BOC then reviewed those BET guidelines and passed our own goals letter, sent townwide with observations and commentary and our spending targets, which in this case for this fiscal year was identical to the BET guidelines. We had in common in both the BET guidelines and the BOC goals describing tremendous economic uncertainty. Here we are 7 months later, and unfortunately, the uncertainties remain with the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic still has many parts of the economy shut down. Joblessness remains high. In fact, Connecticut is the third highest unemployment rate in the nation at 8.3%. And we know locally we have suffered with one of our largest employers, Blue Sky Studios, that offered 470 high-paying jobs leave town. To address the COVID-19 economy, the federal government recently approved $2 trillion in funding. State and local governments will be receiving a flush of $350 billion in funds. Greenwich will be receiving later this fiscal year millions in funds that must be used for pandemic-related costs. However, the federal government is not done in thinking the economy needs a boost. There is a discussion of another $2 trillion in federal spending to address other economic uncertainties. So tonight's vote, if you turn to page 21 of the RTM packet, you will see we are voting on $572 million in appropriations, $442 million in operating out of the general fund, $65 million in capital, and another $65 million across 11 revolving funds. The overall operating and capital general fund budget increases 5% from last fiscal year when the budget was held flat. As mentioned earlier by Chairman of the BET, both the town and the Board of Ed exceeded the capital and the operating spending. Despite this, for numerous reasons, the BOC is only recommending 4 motions tonight, 1 in operating and 3 in capital. And I would like to highlight that with those motions, we are still supporting as a committee $440 million of the $442 million of the operating, and we are only removing, if passed, $1.6 million of the $65 million in capital. We're supporting things like the $1.4 million GEM station in the northwest section of Greenwich, the $19 million Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, the $2.8 million for the new Greenwich High School entrance. These projects have all faced added scrutiny by the RTM and had iterations before fully approved. But we on the BOC believe that it is a wise and rational process that should be the norm for all capital projects. We want to thank the BET for their tremendous work effort over the last few months with the February budget hearings held over one Zoom meeting after another. I am sure you are all suffering Zoom fatigue at this point. We thank the BET for the greater disclosure of items with employee benefits by department. However, we want to provide constructive comments on an area that hopefully does improve. The town charter stipulates, that it is the RTM that is the final analysis and vote on the appropriation proposed for the fiscal year ahead. The BOC noted over 12 conditions the BET placed in both operating capital items that removes the RTM as the entity with the final analysis and vote. We understand and appreciate the use of these BET conditions when there are urgent matters, and it does not conform with the fiscal year town calendar. However, we note that many of these items are not considered urgent, and we respectfully ask that this BET practice be used more judiciously in the future. Finally, we want to thank the Board of Ed the first selectman, the BET, and all of the town department heads that have participated and worked so hard in this fiscal year's budget process. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Alexis Vulgaris, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Thank you. Before I begin, I just want to thank everybody who came, but especially our little tech team. In order to pull this off, we met for 3 meetings totaling about 6 hours. So I want to thank Jude Collins and Catherine LaBalbo, who are our remote participants, Jenny Larkin, Craig Jones, who's sitting on the floor right now, Kim Spezzano, and moderator Byrne. And I hope that with each month, we have more and more people here and that by the fall, we are back in business. So with that, the Health and Human Services Committee divided our 6 budgets up over 2 months, April and May meetings. 4 of the smaller budgets and departments that the committee reviews, the Department of Health, the Senior Center, the Commission on Aging, and the Department of Human Services, all received the committee's unanimous support. We felt that they were doing a tremendous job serving the most vulnerable members of the community during the pandemic. And despite their increased caseload and increased demand for their services that were asked to provide to residents, there are no new staffing increases nor substantial budget increases built into those budgets for next year. The increases projected for those departments are almost exclusively due to mandated salary and wage obligations. Nathaniel Witherell and GEMS also received the committee's unanimous support. However, there are some initiatives being undertaken in both of those organizations that I feel is worth mentioning in greater detail. So first for Nathaniel Witherell. As many of you know, the nursing home industry was one of the hardest hit industries during the pandemic. Prior to COVID, the census is averaging about 190 residents out of 202 beds, or about a 94% occupancy rate. And then when COVID arrived, the facility was essentially closed for new admissions from April through July, resulting in approximately $2.5 million of lost revenue. Now that residents are once again being admitted, the census is slowly trying to increase to pre-pandemic levels. Witherell staff believes that with the transition from Greenwich Woods, which is a local facility in Greenwich, it was a skilled nursing facility, it's going to become an assisted living facility, that there will be an opportunity to capture some residents who would have normally gone there into, and that they would be interested in moving into Witherell. It should also be noted that due to the reduced census, there was approximately $800,000 in savings in operating expenses last year. The state and federal government, recognizing the financial stress placed on long-term care facilities during the pandemic, has provided some financial relief, approximately $2.2 million, largely making up their lost revenue from last summer. Should also be noted that Witherell's operating profit before paying for debt services was approximately $1.4 million. Witherell has worked very hard to develop a fiscal responsibility and revenue plan for the upcoming year. The plan is developed by the Witherell executive staff, is expected to save approximately $2.1 million. And some of the areas that have been targeted for cost savings are reorganizing the staff, management of overtime, standardization of pharmacy drug formularies, management of vendor contracts, and inventory management. The committee briefly inquired about the status of the current RFP for the future of Witherell's management. We learned that the group responsible for issuing the RFP is still evaluating the proposals, and we weren't provided with any substantial details. Overall, if Witherell achieves the projected savings for next year, coupled with positive operating surplus, the executive staff believes that they can project an operating profit of about $474,000. Again, our vote on that budget was unanimous at 12-0-0. GEMS, while not a town department, it is something that is heavily subsidized by the town. The town's contribution to GEMS operating budget this year is about $4.8 million, which is roughly a 1.7% increase from last year, about $82,000. However, you will see that there's a $1.4 million capital allocation for Station 4 located up on King Street. The current facility on King Street is a trailer that was placed on the site in 2013, and that structure has now long passed its useful life, and a permanent facility is necessary for station efficiency and garaging the ambulance, which is currently housed outside, often in a large pool of standing water. GEMS has requested CIP funding for this project since fiscal year 2016, and GEMS has agreed to cover all costs associated with architectural engineering, furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. GEMS will manage construction with DPW oversight. And again, our vote on that was 11-0-0. And once again, Health and Human Services would like to extend an enormous thank you to the departments that we are charged with. There was probably no other collective group of departments that were hit hardest in COVID between our Department of Health, which was running all of the clinics and the vaccines and the contact tracing, and our Department of Human Services, which was caring for an enormous uptick in case, and our Commission on Aging and Nathaniel Witherell and our, everybody. So we thank them for all their work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is the Land Use Committee Chair, Peter Berg.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to be back. So the Land Use Committee met jointly with the Finance Committee last Monday. You already heard Brooks Harris give a report. We took up the Budget Overview Committee's motion to cut capital budget for the Brookside Drive at Glenville Road intersection. And I'll hold off giving that report until that motion is made later. We also took up the capital budget for Greenwich Avenue intersection improvement, and likewise, I'll give that report later. We voted on the budget resolutions that relate to land use matters. Our vote on those was 12-0-0. We then took up operating budgets for the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals, the Condemnation Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Conservation Commission, and the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency and Land Use Administration, all those budget lines. We had Pat Sesto, our Director of Environmental Affairs, Katie DeLuca, our Town Planner, and Margarita Albin, the Chairman of our Planning and Zoning Commission, to discuss questions regarding their operating and capital budgets. They provided details on a reduction in the budget of one full-time administrative staff position. That is, that position was cut before we got the budget. And that impacts both conservation and planning and zoning. Ms. Sesto and DeLuca both said that they believe that that reduction is not going to have a significant impact on their operations. Ms. Sesto noted that there were two capital items in her department that were removed from the budget before it went to the BET. One was funds for the East-West bike route study, and the other was funds for plans to mitigate against sea level rise. Ms. DeLuca shared that likewise, Planning and Zoning did not receive funding for a requested loan to Greenwich Communities, that is the Housing Authority, to accelerate construction of affordable housing in town. Also, in response to a question regarding budget pressures, Ms. DeLuca described the workload of our zoning enforcement officers and suggested that although there's a reluctance in town to add any headcount, that that workload is very large, and as a result, the zoning enforcement officers are unable to address many of the zoning violations in town. So she's hoping that in the future, she'll be able to gain staff there. Our vote on those operating budgets was 12,000. And then we took up the rest of the highway, streets and bridges capital projects, and we voted 12,000 to approve those, excluding the Brookside Glenville Road intersection improvement, which I'll talk about later. That's the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next up is our Legislative and Rules Committee. Kip Bergweger is chairman, to be followed by Catherine LaBalbo, chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
We took up the budget for the probate court and the law department. The probate budget has a flat budget. It's no change from the previous years. We approved the budget 12,000. In April, we had Dennis Kokanos, who spoke with the committee in place of Barbara Schellenberg, the acting town attorney, who was unavailable. And he reported that the department budget is a little less than last year. There's a slight decrease. Professional services, there's a flat line item of $1,150,000. The new town attorneys support every single department in the town, and they utilize outside counsel. At our meeting this month, L&I committee members speculated about the effect on the court system of the easing of the pandemic and how the load of legal cases will look when the judicial department starts moving cases, particularly in jury trials. Other committee members expressed uncertainty about the courts when they open up, that there will be a real rush to move the cases forward. Assistant town attorney Aman Ahmad told the committee that depositions are proceeding, discovery is being worked on, and cases are being prepared. Committee was assured by BET member Karen Fasuliotis that the attorneys handling the town's legal business are on top of the cases. Vote on the legal department budget was 12,000. That's it.
Thank you. Catherine LaBalbo, to be followed by Michael Spilo.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again with you in person. Your Park and Recreation Committee reviewed the budget documents within the framework of greater townwide initiatives, including ongoing capital projects that often cross into DPW, but will ultimately be managed by Park and Recreation. That includes items like the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, or as some may remember, the Ekman Center, and Dorothy Hamill Rink. We were joined by Bill Drake, Miriam Cruiser from the BET, Joe Siciliano, the Director of Park and Rec, and Blaise Leviton, his new Deputy Director. There's no doubt the pandemic has continued to put great pressure on the department and its resources, specifically the premium put on our green passive open space, but also the organization and operations of recreation and camp programs. In lieu of requesting an increased headcount to meet these new trends, the director noted it reallocated its current staffing assignments. The department has actually seen a 28-person reduction over the past 20 years. Full-time staff is comprised primarily of the Teamsters Union employees, which, as you may know now, have not received a wage increase since 2019 due to lapse in contract. While it's common to see contract negotiations carry beyond an existing contract expiration, the town has been impacted by turnover in the role of town negotiator. We were advised that Human Resources is currently reallocating its resources to manage contract negotiation while that position remains unfilled. Temporary salaries are a large part of Park and Recreation due to its seasonal operations and comprise about $2 million, the total $9.5 million of its operating budget. Unique to this year's budget, as Mr. Mason
our chairman of the BET noted, was that approximately $800,000 traditionally allocated to capital items was reallocated to operating. Most notable of those items is the playground inspections upgrades, which was always nice to see those broken out to make sure they were equitably distributed across the town. Also, the tennis and basketball surfacing, which is $133,000, and the organic turf program, which is $300,000, which was taken up that all fields, grass fields, were dealt with organic turf when the education department decided to cross over into that years ago. Revenue from recreational programs deviated from the traditional fiscal year trend. However, seasonal passes were issued essentially later in the season, so they're off the fiscal year schedule, but we don't feel that that's an actual reduction in revenue. That people are still getting out there, buying their passes last year as they were this year. It was just slightly delayed, so it's not showing up in our capital revenue budget this year. Noted in Marine is that a number of our docks are not ADA compliant. And this will, and appropriations for that may rely on input from the Justice Department as we seek a way to make our docks more ADA compliant. According to the 2020 Plan of Conservation and Development, Greenwich has 21 public athletic fields located on school campuses and public parkland for which the department is responsible for maintaining. With 1,300 acres of parkland, approximately 70 is dedicated to active playing fields. Notable in the absence in this year's budget were that for our second year, repairs needed for the Bruce Park Loop Bridge, which continues to degrade, were deferred. And funding for soil remediation at Westernsfield has again, for a fifth year, failed to be included in this year's budget. Also notable is that interscholastic sports for Western Middle School have been moved to other sites, which include Straza Field, which is adjacent to Dorothy Hamill Skating Rink. Unsatisfactory conditions and availability compounded by closures of fields continue to plague all user groups in the Greenwich community. The department is committed to improving compacted soil conditions for better drainage with funding it has received in previous and this year's fiscal year cycles. Earmarked funds for 2 school properties, Eastern Middle School and Central Middle School, and 2 municipal properties, Havermeyer and Bible Street. Since 1998, it's important to note that the field inventory actually has been reduced by 8 fields because of school and municipal expansion. The golf course remains a model for success and self-funding, its operations and food concessions, and a successful partnership with the town. A lot of talk discussed around Dorothy Hamill project, and it was suggested that they possibly restructure it similar to the way the Griff is managed now. There's a committee that's been restructured and compromised primarily as private skating clubs and members of town departments. The operating cost for fiscal year 1920 was $190,000. This includes no full-time staff. The committee suggested the BET consider structuring Dorothy Hamill to the Griff. And current facilities charge the Greenwich hockey team approximately or budgeted $88,000. We know that rink time is at a premium, and this may continue to become more difficult for the high school to find time should Dorothy Hamill have to close. The request of $950,000 is for the balance of the contracted architecture and engineering design fees and is put out for RFQ, which received a high level of interest with almost 20 teams of firms in 2020. The director felt planning, outreach, and consensus would be achieved in the next 6 months to go through the public hearing and site plan approval process in early 2022. The project's continuation will be contingent upon planning and zoning approval and a number of intermediate concerns will need to be addressed in terms of neighborhood impact, severe deficiency in zoning and parking, vehicular access, honoring and preserving the Byron Memorial, and a number of concerns were raised that fall outside of the land use process, including phasing, fiscal and operational management, and improved hours of public access to a publicly owned and subsidized amenity. In recognition of the resolution of these concerns, the desire to keep the decisions of the committee at the forefront of the RTM, the director agreed to include an ex officio non-voting member from the RTM the Park and Recreation Committee, who would join the working group and be a liaison as it moves through the process. We can discuss that further, but that's all. Okay. Thank you.
It's a new phone. Figured that out. All right, stop. Michael Spilo, Chair of our Public Works Committee, to be followed by Richard Newman, Chair of our Tenant Services.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm only able to speak thanks to a prodigious use of decongestants, and I wanted to avoid sparking any panic with my coughing and sneezing, so I'm here at home. Your Public Works Committee had several discussions of the budget. We formed 6 special subcommittees. Each subcommittee reported back on their analysis of a section of the Public Works budget. We spent a lot of time reviewing and discussing all the Public Works capital items, including field remediation in the current and future budgets. We have been following the slow progress of remediation through DEEP for several years, and last year we met directly with DEEP representatives. Overall, the DPW budget was 3.8% up, but this included several recurring items which were previously on the capital budget and were moved this year into the operating budget as maintenance items. This movement off the capital budget had the effect of providing a total of $3.9 million more for capital spending on other projects relative to prior years. Despite this year's larger than usual increase in DPW operating budget, over the past 10 years, the Public Works budget has increased by an average of 1.3% a year in a period when inflation was averaging 1.6% a year. This despite fluctuations, significant fluctuations in expenses, including everything from fuel and salt to waste removal. We took up 3 motions to cut items, 2 of which passed. These are both capital items, and these motions overlap motions made by the BOC and Finance, and you will hear those motions and discussion at the appropriate time. At our final budget meeting, I mistakenly informed the committee that a no vote would result in a reversion to the prior year's budget. I was corrected after the meeting that the result of a no vote is in fact a failure to act on the budget, and thus items will revert to the BET budget as adopted by the BET. Public Works, I'm not sure if it's appropriate to report the Public Works vote on the budget as amended and the budget overall at this time. But in any event, Public Works voted 9-3-0 in favor of the budget as amended, with District 6 voting no, objecting to the sidewalk cuts, and District 9 and 10 objecting to the budget overall. The vote on the budget as presented was 8-4-0, with District 2 voting no because District 2 wanted the cuts. District 6, 9, and 10 voted no because they believe the capital budget is underfunded. District 10 also wanted to protest absent funding for the Northwest Fire Station. I would like to thank our Public Works Committee, our department committee for all their hard work, and our Public Works Department for keeping all our critical town facilities and functions operating throughout the pandemic. Everything from sewers to the dump to snow and leaf removal operated, and we even got 18 miles of road paved this year. My thanks to all involved.
Thank you very much. Richard Newman, Chair of our Town Services Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the BET, members of the RTM. Town Services oversees 13 budgets covering $57.5 million in salaries and 379 employees in the town. Purchasing, administrative services, emergency operations, ethics, fire department, first selectman's office, GEMS, human resources, IT, police, registrar of voters, town clerk, and the RTM. All of these departments stayed open through COVID lockdowns.
and continue to service our town and residents. We owe them all our gratitude. I had written here an applause, but with the small audience, I don't want to have a little applause. Our process is to have town services delegates meet with departments heads to review their budgets line by line. All major changes up or down are discussed and clarified. Department heads join our April, May, and a special meeting that we call to review budgets with the entire committee. Though there have been some changes in department heads, we found continuity in their budgets. All of our reviewed budgets were within guidelines, and we found no irregularities. We found that COVID slows things down, but speeded up the transition to online delivery of services. Visits to town hall dropped by 2/3, and online requests grew 100%. The registrar of voter and town clerk oversaw one primary and one election with unprecedented turnout and absentee ballots. They reported a very low 0.5% error rate in our ballots. There were 4 reported cases of voting both in Greenwich and Florida, according to the little-known nationwide consortium of voter registrations. They will be investigated. Purchasing is working on adding e-bidding to their site, and they reported that many contracts that are coming in now have more bidders and are coming in at a lower cost. As you heard, GEM's budget came in 2.3% lower and is now annualizing down 0.2% for the last 5 years. Their transports were down due to COVID, with less accidents and people refusing transport to the hospital in fear of COVID. They had a patient who was having a heart attack who was too scared to go to the hospital. GEM Station 4 will be built to replace the dilapidated trailer, with GEMS covering the architecture and engineering and $200,000 of building costs from their fundraising. Police department reduced their headcount by 2 officers, and unfortunately, 1/3 of the force is eligible to retire. The police department responded to 39,108 calls last year, including 130 stolen cars. Every stolen car, again, had the keys in them when stolen. Fire department was allowed to have a new assistant chief of administration, but had to give up the position that oversees the volunteers. If the responsibilities can't be absorbed across the department, fire administration will be asking us to review the position again. Though the matrix study came out with recommendations to add career firefighters to the Round Hill station, the BET declined to fund it this year. The BET also removed the purchase of a scheduled pumper replacement for the 2nd year in a row. With the fleet department understaffed for repairs and short on parts, and a 12-month replacement time for these engines, we could end up with a firehouse without an engine. And we currently have 1 reserve in the town. If completed projects, including, or IT completed projects, including email system, website, disaster recovery, phone system, email vault, and cybersecurity. I could go on, but I will not. Town services voted 10-0-0 for all of our covered budgets, with districts 3 and 7 absent because of the late time of the evening. Thank you.
Kimberly Salib, Chairman of our Transportation Committee, with that report.
Good evening, Moderator Byrne and members of the RTM. My name is Kimberly Salib and I chair the Transportation Committee. Our committee met the past 2 meetings, and we met with town departments and agencies to discuss their 21-22 budget and plans for the upcoming year. At our most recent meeting, Leslie Tarkington from the BET was present to answer questions about the budget as passed by the BET. We first met with Deputy Chief Mark Marino of Parking Services, who reported an overall 3.7% budget decrease. The decision not to renew the consulting contract resulted in a 25% reduction in professional services. Bruce Place parking lot is the only capital project for this budget period. $138,000 worth of other capital projects were deferred. They plan to charge a minimal fee to restaurants to use the parking spaces as outdoor dining space. He also discussed a new parking plan for merchants to try to free up some short-term parking spaces on Greenwich Avenue. Next, we met with Jay Domasek from Fleet Management. His budget decreased 4.6% from last year. Salaries are down 1.3%. Over 1.3%. Overtime, which is heavily dependent on winter weather, was decreased by 40% for the 21-22 budget. Motor fuel was reduced by 19%. When oil prices bottomed out at the beginning of COVID, they purchased an additional contract for fuel that was favorably priced. This is a one-time savings. Tuition payments increased due to online classes for officers and other fleet drivers to learn about their highly technical vehicles online. He also noted that vehicles in the fleet have a 15-year time period and are not retired and are retired when they reach 100,000 miles. We next met with Tom Miserandino of the CFO of GEMS, Greenwich EMS. GEMS is not a town department. Instead, it is an agency as it operates as an independent 501c3 nonprofit in contract with town to provide ambulatory services. Two other committees have spoken about GEMS, so I'm going to move on to our meeting with Jim Michael of DPW. Most of our discussion revolved around the proposed Glenville Road Brookside project study for $175,000. It seems DPW and some Eagle Hill parents find the intersection difficult and possibly dangerous. Accident data relative to other intersections around town place this intersection at a 50+ for number of accidents. Local neighbors also met with us. They have a petition signed by 150 people requesting no change be considered or made to the charming bucolic intersection. Proposed construction changes could involve eminent domain issues. This budgeted $175,000 would be for a study. It was reported that any actual construction costs would be covered by the state budget. On this, we voted 4-5-0 not to take away the funds. Next, we met with Dr. Ann Carabello, who's the deputy superintendent, to discuss the BOE buses. And the budget for the BOE transportation is flat year-over-year. A bus bid with an RFP will go out in October 2021 for the 2023 budget. And in this proposal, they will be considering electric buses. Okay, and lastly, we met with Mike Miller. Mike Miller is the TAG board member and treasurer. And Mr. Miller reviewed TAG's important role during the COVID to deliver food throughout Greenwich, donated by Neighbor to Neighbor and Town Services. Food delivery increased by a multiple of 10 from 200 to 2,000 families around town. Budget issues were met with 2 PPO loans to be forgiven of $100,000 each, as well as $50,000 from Health and Human Services budget. 2 successful programs were initiated: Feed Greenwich with home delivery of weekly food for 2,000 families, and Feed Students. Their Dial-A-Ride service is ramping back up, and they have installed plexiglass in their vehicles. The town portion for the 2022 TAG budget is forecasted for $279,000, which includes $18,000 for safe rides and an additional $5,000 increase to support pandemic response services. In conclusion, Mr. Miller provided our committee with an in-depth look at the services that TAG offers our town. And we are greatly, we're very grateful for the services that TAG offers our town. The committee voted on the budget, and our vote was, I want to read this right. We had a brief conversation about the budget and the departments, and we took a vote on the budget. The vote was 8-0-1 with 3 absent, D9 abstained, D2, D7, and D10 were absent. Thank you so much.
All right, that concludes our committee reports on the budget. Item 3. I'll now summarize how we will proceed at this point. The operative document is the document that consists a total of 37 pages. I'm going to start on page 1, reading the major object codes. If anyone has a motion addressed to any of those line items, you have to let us know when I reach the item. We are aware of the 4 proposed cuts that to the employee benefits, which will be made by District 7. The cut of the Brookside Drive. Oh, I thought District 7 was introducing. I know BOC approved it. All right, so it's BOC and District 7. The Brookside Drive funds. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the District 7. Yeah, the employee benefits is BOC. District 7 on Brookside Drive, Greenwich Avenue intersection, also BOC, and finally Hamel Rink, BOC. So those are the 4 that we're aware of. And I mentioned that because if I didn't include what you might be intending, you have to be ready. Alert your district representative now, so that when we get to the item, your district representative can immediately let us know there is something to be taken care of. Now, item 3 is the main item. That is the main motion before us. As everyone hopefully now knows, the RTM can approve the amount suggested by the BET. It can reduce a line item within certain limitations or cut entirely. And so any attempt to do that is considered to be a motion to amend item number 3. Because we don't want confusion, our practice has been not to allow secondary amendments, which would be a motion to amend, but the way we'll handle it, we'll let everyone have an opportunity to make whatever motion they want. I hope everyone read the memo that I sent. It summarizes that procedure. And as I said, We just want everyone to understand what they're voting on when we take any votes. All right, so when we have finished going through the line items, we'll then take any changes to the language of budget resolutions. When we have finished that, we will take our final vote. There are bonding resolutions that require approval by a majority of the membership, which is 116 members. That final vote requires just a majority of those present and voting to pass, not the bonding resolution, but the budget itself. And been a lot of talk about the effect of a majority no vote, which is the RTM will be deemed to have failed to act, which would allow the recommended budget as proposed by the BET to go into effect for the next year. Without further ado, let us begin on page 1 of the operative document, which is dated at the bottom, April 6, 2021. 101, Representative Town Meeting. 102, Ethics. 103, Historical District Commission. 104, Emergency Operations. 105, Office of the First Selectman. 106, Purchasing. 107, Administrative Services. 109, Human Resources. 111, Probate Court. 120, Registrar of Voters. 130, Finance. 134, Information Technology. 136, Assessor. 135, Assessor. 136, Board of Assessment Appeals. 139, Tax Collector. 140, Law. 150, Town Clerk. 161, Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals. 170, Condemnation Commission. 171, Planning and Zoning Commission. 172, Conservation Commission. 173, Inland Wetlands and Watercourses, one word. 174, Land Use Administration. 195, Commission on Aging. 196, Senior Center. Brings us to the Fire Department. 201, Fire Administration. 202, Training. 204, Fire Marshal. 205, Firefighting Force. 206, Fire Apparatus and Equipment. 207, Fire Department Buildings. 208, Volunteers. Police Department. 211, Administration. 212, Dispatch and Communications. 213, General Services. 216, Criminal Investigation. 217, Uniform Patrol. Department of Public Works. 301, Administration. 302, Engineering. 312, Highway, Streets and Bridges. 315, Board of Ed Maintenance. 321, Waste Disposal. 345, Building, Construction and Maintenance. 351, Building Inspection. Vehicle Maintenance. 380, Fleet. Health Department. 401, Administration. 710, wait a minute, did I skip a page? Okay, didn't sound right. 405, Health Environmental. 410, Special Clinical Services. 415, Family Health. 425, Laboratory. External Entities is 440. Human Services, 501, Administration. 502, Adult and Family Services. 509, Aging Homemaker Only Services. With respect to schools, any cuts would have to be addressed to administration. Our ability to target line items is limited. We cannot do that for the operational or class 1 expenditures. So 600, Board of Ed Administration. That brings us to libraries. 701, Greenwich Library. 702, Peterson Wing. 710, Perrott Library. Parks and Recreation. 801, Administration. 811, Recreation Supervision. 812, Organized Recreation. 814, Eastern Civic Center. 815, Community Centers. 816, Skating Rink. 817, Western Civic Center. 821, Parks and Trees Administration. 822, Parks and Playgrounds and Fields. 825, Equipment Maintenance. 829, Trees. 831, Marine Supervision. 832, Maintenance. 833 beaches, 834 harbors and boating facilities. All right, we're now on page 10 and we reach the first line item that we are aware of a cut. This is 901 employee benefits. Lucia Jansen, Chair of our Budget Overview Committee.
Good evening. The BOC voted 12-0-0 to cut 2 million from the 2021-22 budget under the line item 901 employee benefits, MOC 700 benefits, reducing the line item from 98,231,980 to 96,231,980.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second and is currently before us. I will call on Ms. Jansen to speak for the BOC and then Brooks Harris for the Finance Committee. Lucia Jansen.
Hi. Both the BET and the BOC had learned earlier in the fiscal year from Roland Geiger, the town budget director, the hardworking Roland Geiger, that the healthcare premium was expected to be lower than the 10% for the state healthcare plan. The rate increase was still unknown during the BET hearings. However, there was still the idea the BET premium, the premium would be lowered. So the BET lowered from 10% to 6% the increase as a placeholder. Then Mr. Geiger notified the BOC a couple weeks ago after the BET's budget vote. The premium was recently announced by the state, which is a 2% increase, giving the town 2 million in savings. This special meeting of the BOC was called to discuss and vote on motions related to the employee healthcare benefit cost. And as said earlier, the BOC voted 12-0-0 in support of the reduction.
Thank you. Brooks Harris, Vice Chair of our Finance Committee. And if there's any other committee to report, please let us know.
As discussed, we learned that the cost of this item would be less next year than we expected. So the cost was built into the BET budget at a higher rate. When we learned the cost would be less, we sought to reduce the item by $2 million. Finance quite agreed with that, and we voted 12-0-0 to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. No further committee reports. All right, we have 4 speakers who signed up. We'll start with Dan Ozesmere, to be followed by Michael Spilo.
Thank you. I think that most of the issues have been covered. I would just note that a few years back, the RTM had does have precedent in terms of doing this. A few years back, we did reduce the healthcare by 1.75 million. Again, this was the same situation where the finance director notified the RTM of the reduced premium, and we accommodated that request. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Spilo, to be followed by Carl Higbee.
I have nothing further, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Carl Higbee to be followed. Mr. Harris, are you? No? All right. Carl Higbee will be our final speaker on this.
Speak.
You can speak.
Has it been unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, good. Hey, so I'm just going to try to wrap this up real quick. Just in the general spending thing, like guys, I Mike Mason from the BET, I appreciate everything you're doing, but we got to save every penny we can. We're bleeding people out of Greenwich. We're, you know, everything's gone up. In the last 10 years, we've raised $50 million in liabilities, from insurances to cost on employees and things like that. We can't keep going down this path. And this is to all the items. Like, Connecticut, 3rd highest unemployment in the nation. We have Julian Curtis coming up. We have Central Middle School that undoubtedly will need to be completely renovated or even redone. Like, We can't be spending money on a bunch of junk that, like, ice skating rinks and civic centers and all this stuff. Guys, we got to get this spending under control. And I'm begging you, please vote fiscally responsible here, because if we don't, we're going to be in big trouble. That's it.
All right, will the district tabulators please mark your voting cards? BOC motion to reduce code 901 employee benefits by $2 million. And proceed to poll your delegation. If you are in favor of that cut, you vote yes. If you are opposed and want to leave that $2 million in, you vote no. We will await, we will wait 5 minutes. We will not go beyond 5 minutes. We can continue at that point, but we will give our district tabulators 5 minutes of concentration on tabulating them. All right, that's the end of our 5-minute period. I know the voting is still ongoing. I will not call for more than 2 at a time, so we may have to stop longer. All right, so we are on page 10. That was 901. Continuing, the next is 902, unemployment and workers' compensation. 908, insurance. 911, taxes for town properties. 950, repayment of debt principal. 999, transfer to other funds. And that brings us to the end of the general fund. And on to the capital. This is on page 11. Now, for this, we can go in to the individual line items for capital. So I'm just going to call the major object codes. We are, as I said, I'm aware of 3 that are coming up here, but if anyone targeting anything else, you got to let us know immediately. 134, information technology. 172, conservation. 206, fire apparatus. 213, police general services. 312, DPW, highway, streets and bridges. And the first in this group is 960. So this is 312, 960, 22319, Brookside Drive at Glenville Road intersection improvements. Pardon me? 22319. 22319. All right, and this will be presented by Wynn McDaniel, Chair of District 7.
All right, thank you, Tom, and members of the RTM. District 7 moves to delete $175,000 in funding for project 960-22319, the Brookside Drive at Glenville Road intersection improvements. Kim Blank on our District 7 is a proponent of this item. Should she speak now or after the committee report?
Well, first of all, let's get it in front of us. That being offered on behalf of one of our districts, it does not require a second, and that motion to cut is now before us. So I will call upon whatever District 7 representative. If it's Kimberly Blank, then now is the appropriate time to give that district report.
Okay.
Thank you.
So at our April 8th meeting, District 7 voted 18-1 to delete funding for this project. We heard a compelling presentation from neighbors who are opposed and who I know will speak to us more tonight. Our district overwhelmingly agreed that this project is unnecessary and damaging to the character of our neighborhood. You can see this from our nearly unanimous vote. The lone dissenter said that she drives this intersection and finds the sight lines difficult. Let me now go on to give you some further information on this. In my 14 years on the RTM, I feel like I've sometimes had to make tough decisions. We often get items where there are strong arguments on both sides. So it's nice to be up here tonight asking you to vote on one that I see as a relatively easy one. A motion to delete a lot of money for a project the town doesn't need and the neighborhood doesn't want. I'm glad the 5 committees that considered this agree. As you'll hear, the vote out of those committees was a total of 45, 10, and 2. I have a lot of respect for DPW and the hard work that they do for this town, and I appreciate that they're out there looking for opportunities for state funding. But this project is similar to DPW projects that the RTM has voted against in other parts of town, like Old Greenwich and North Street Fairfield Road. Fortunately, we're here early in the process. The town spent $600,000 before we stopped the Old Greenwich project, and we want to avoid that situation here. I'm going to use my time to first give you some history on the project, then explain why we think the project is unnecessary, and finally tell you why we think it's undesirable. First, some history. DPW proposed a project at Brookside and Glenville in 2019 as part of the 2020 budget. At the time, the CIP sheet asked for $50,000 for design to realign Brookside and Glenville. If you're unfamiliar with the intersection, it has an unusual geometry. Like many areas of town, most of the houses along this stretch have been there for almost 100 years, if not longer. I'm biased, but it's a beautiful area with old stone walls and properties set back from the road. I've lived one house down from this intersection for over 20 years, and the intersection and traffic patterns have always been this way. We gave DPW $50,000 to look into this project, and it's important to note that according to the original CIP sheet, the initial request was only for changes at Brookside and Glenville, and the rationale given was to enable people to make a right turn from Brookside onto Glenville. Right now, you can't make a right turn there because sightlines make it difficult. There was no mention at that time of safety or traffic as a rationale, just enabling right turns. In 2019, they estimated they would need $150,000 the following year and $1.7 million after that for construction, which they hoped would be reimbursed by the state. I first heard about the project in late 2019 from some of my neighbors. DPW had arranged private meetings because depending on which design they choose, they may need to impact some of their property. In some cases, they may have to acquire their property, which could raise issues of eminent domain since the owners object to this project. The first public unveiling of the project was via Zoom on April 30th of last year. I'm sure everyone remembers what life was like on April 30th of last year. It was the height of lockdown, and DPW announced on the meeting that it was their first virtual public meeting. It was attended by about 18 people or households. I'm not sure who they gave notice about the meeting to, but there were very few Brookside or Valley neighbors on the call. The important thing is that what we saw at the April 30th meeting was a very different scope and rationale for this project. First, on the scope. Now the project is not just for Brookside and Glenville, but also makes changes to the Valley and Glenville intersection. It turns out that realigning Brookside and Glenville in order to enable right turns is not a trivial thing, but requires moving Brookside onto private property and raising and regrading the road or putting a large traffic circle at that intersection. They are also proposing putting a large traffic circle at the Valley Road intersection. Second, they all of a sudden were saying that the reason for this project was to address safety and traffic concerns. But in their very own presentation, they present information that contradicts this argument. DPW's own accident data shows that the area is safe and has historically had few accidents. And they showed that traffic levels are acceptable or better than acceptable now and are projected to be so until at least 2039. Please note, even though the project scope has doubled to encompass two separate intersections, DPW has never revised their construction cost estimate. It is still in at the same 1.75 million. Perhaps that will be sufficient, but I think it's reasonable to question whether this estimate is way too low since the project is now much larger than they originally described. Okay, so that's the history. Why do we think this project is unnecessary? Well, DPW says the reason for this project is to improve safety and traffic flow. Those sound like good goals, but the data does not support this. According to DPW's own information, these intersections are already safe and do not have too much traffic. Of course, we all may have our own anecdotal experiences with this intersection. It is an unusual configuration, and if you've driven it, you may find it tricky, but the actual data rather than the anecdotal experience shows that it is safe. In DPW's presentation, they show that at the Brookside intersection, there have been 5 accidents over a 3-year period. At the Valley intersection, there have been 6 accidents. And at a third area in between these where Eagle Hills driveway meets Glenville Road, there have been 2. This is a low rate of accidents. Unfortunately, there have never been fatalities. My neighbors did a fantastic job looking at how this accident data stacks up relative to other intersections in town. For example, using state data, they found that the Brookside intersection is number 77 in terms of accidents per million cars. So there are a lot of other places throughout town where we should be looking first in terms of safety. In fact, the Brookside and Valley intersections would be even lower on the list, but my neighbors excluded I-95, the Merritt, and the Post Road in their analysis, which is where the bulk of the accidents happen. So not only are these intersections safe on an absolute basis with very few accidents, they are also safe on a relative basis compared to other intersections in town. DPW also did a traffic study of this area. They looked at the traffic flow during peak times of rush hour and Eagle Hill drop-off and pickup. And what they found is that at the busiest times of day, it has an acceptable level of service, similar to the level that they design new intersections for. And at normal times, it has an even better than acceptable level of service. They even went and looked at their projections for 2039 traffic and found that traffic service would remain acceptable or better. So truly, there is no traffic rationale here. So where are we? Spending millions of dollars to solve non-existent safety and traffic problems. That alone should be enough to persuade you that this project isn't worth it. But not only is it not a good use of our money, it is something the neighbors wouldn't want even if it were free. There is widespread neighborhood opposition to this project. Even though this issue hasn't been well publicized by the town, we have a petition with over 150 signatures opposing this project. There are several reasons why we don't want DPW's proposed changes. First, we think they will damage the character and beauty of our neighborhood. This is a curving stretch of Glenville Road with large old houses, mature trees, and 100-year-old stone walls. And they want to plop down one or two big, unattractive traffic circles smack in the middle of it. That destroys the feeling and flow of a beautiful country road. Second, we're concerned about the potential environmental impacts from the project. Horseneck Brook runs through this entire area and flows into the sound. As they raise the grade of the road, they may need to create culverts over the brook. The complicated slope in winter may require more de-icer that will flow into our waters and sound. There are many potential unknowns that concern us. Third, there is the impact to private property. As I mentioned, the town may need to take property from some abutting neighbors through eminent domain or force them to reconfigure their 100-year-old properties. Look, sometimes eminent domain may be needed when there is a very important public good. I get that. But shouldn't we as a town have a high bar for when we do this to our homeowners? Put yourself in their shoes. If the town is going to commandeer your property, it should have a very important reason. Finally, we're concerned that the changes they're proposing will actually create traffic and safety issues. Forcing the flow of traffic on Glenville to slow down when there are problems with sightlines could cause more rear-end accidents. And DPW has admitted that the traffic circles will be narrow for trucks to navigate, causing the potential for blockages on Glenville or increased truck traffic on the Post Road. So to summarize, this is a project that is projected to cost millions of dollars to fix a problem that doesn't exist. It will mar a beautiful neighborhood, potentially cause environmental and safety issues, and negatively impact private property. That is why I started by saying this is an easy one. We are here on budget night. Some of you are thinking we are spending too much. For you, this is a no-brainer. But some of you are thinking we are spending too little, that our town needs to spend more on safety and infrastructure. For you, I also think this is a no-brainer. This is money that can be applied to the important needs of our town rather than wasted on a solution in search of a problem. I urge you to vote yes to delete funds for this wasteful project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to remind myself, as well as our committee chairs who are giving reports, that we do have a limit in effect. So I forgot to time at the beginning. Our next speaker is Lucia Jansen, chair of our BOC, to be followed by Brooks Harris with the Finance Committee report.
We voted unanimously to take up this item. We had both points of view attending the BOC meeting. The proponent and opponent the opponent was the town DPW department. Kim Blank and neighbor David Weidrich and Katie Babuska representing the neighborhood views. Kim Blank introduced the neighborhood perspective and talked about the efforts the neighborhood RTM had undertaken to gather community views. This was followed by David Weindrecht, who shared a PowerPoint presentation. He highlighted in the presentation that this intersection is number 58 on the list of unsafe intersections in Greenwich, and service aspects in that it meets the service level goals at all hours of the day. And that these intersections in the community perspective is in preserving the historic character and beauty of Glenville Road. James Michael from Town DPW addressed this project. He said the $75,000 initial amount is to carry the project through initial design and municipal improvement status. The $100,000 conditioned money was for final design costs, and that Greenwich expected to receive $1.4 million in state funding. Michaels told us that community consultation had been conducted in the first public meeting last summer 2020 via Zoom, which was attended by 20 people. He related that safety and service were the primary factors that DPW focused on in identifying these projects. Although the level of accidents at these three intersections did not demonstrate a major safety issue, a 48-hour survey by DPW suggested that when near misses were considered, important safety issues existed. He also relayed the results of a survey of the Brookside community where 72% of respondents chose one of 5 intersection change options, while 28% chose no option. The BOC vote for this item was 9-1. District 8 and 10 voted against because they feel this intersection is poorly designed and dangerous, and they support change to it. District 3 abstained because the member thought there should be a simple right turn on Brookside, but that was not what was in the proposal.
Shouldn't it be near hits?
Yes, probably.
But I digress. Brooks Harris, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you. We took up this issue, and members from DPW and the Town Building Commission came to finance to argue for the project, and residents and members of the RTM from the district argued against it. The points in support were primarily the 48-hour survey that was alluded to, which indicated that there were a lot of near misses or hits, depending on how you look at it. And also this survey of residents, but it wasn't clear how scientific those were relative to the longer term data or the sentiment of the district itself, which was clearly represented by their presence at our meeting. Proponents of this project argued that we only have to pay for the planning and the state is likely to pay for the construction cost. Although if it's not money well spent, the fact that the state is spending it is probably not a lot of comfort for us. And they also argued that $75,000 was already spent, which again is not a compelling rationale. The points against, RTM members in District 7 pointed out the intersection is statistically pretty safe, and they were strongly opposed to this. They thought it would be disruptive to the character of the neighborhood. And they point to a lot of other intersections in Greenwich that are more dangerous. So if we're going to spend our planning money and construction money, those would be better spent in those areas. And then finally, the environmental concern for Horseneck Brook, which was alluded to before. In conclusion, it seems like there's no urgent need here, and other projects would probably be more needed from a safety point of view. We voted 11-1-0 to recommend removing this expenditure from the budget. D6 voted against removing this because they thought there may be some safety benefit here. Thank you.
First, before proceeding further,
Mr. Moderator. Sorry, sir. This is Michael Spilo of the Public Works Committee. We have a report. We took this item up and voted on it.
All right, so I will put you on the list. I have 3 other committees as well who have not yet reported. So you're on the list. But before continuing further, we do have the result of the vote on the BOC motion to reduce the employee benefits account by $2 million. Those in favor, 186, opposed 28, abstaining 6. I note, so we now have 4 additional committee reports, land use. Oh, no, you're on the list already. I had you, and then transportation. So land use, public works, and transportation. There are 17 yeah, looks like 18 speakers. It appears 18 or 19, it appears they're all for the cut. And so I just want to alert our DPW commissioner or deputy commissioner that it would be my intention after hearing the committee reports to hear from the department. So I just wanted to alert them to that before we go to the list of speakers. So Peter Berg is here with the Land Use Committee report.
Good evening again. And so land use met jointly with the Finance Committee. So then you've already heard their report from Brooks Harris. The Land Use Committee vote on this item was 11 in favor, 1 opposed. That is in favor of the motion to cut the full appropriation of $175,000. District 3 was the no vote, voted against the cut because he felt the intersection is dangerous and requires improvements. Finally, I should have mentioned earlier that that David Weisbrod from the BET attended the Land Use Committee meeting, and he was very helpful and he was greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Spilo with the Public Works Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sorry for jumping in there. Your Public Works Committee had a motion to cut this item from the District 7 member. We heard a presentation from neighbors and from Commissioner Siebert and Deputy Commissioner Michael. The representative of the neighbors said the neighbors felt that it was wasteful to spend money on this intersection. He indicated many neighbors opposed the changes, and he felt the neighbors all felt the intersection was safe. He also said that town safety studies in 2018 and 2012 did not find the intersection problematic. And he pointed out that DPW's data, which showed low accidents per million vehicle, as well as the neighbors' own data. We also heard that the DPW presentation data showed that the proposed changes would make traffic worse on Glenville, potentially leading to more accidents. We voted 10-1-1 in favor of the cut. Those opposed or abstaining felt that we should defer to DPW's expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Salib with the Transportation Committee report.
The Transportation Committee also considered this, and we voted 4-5-0 with 3 absents. We also met with the neighbors and with Jim Michael from DPW. And so, some of the committee members felt as though since the state was going to fund it, that we should go ahead with the project, but the neighbors spoke up about the safety and the eminent domain issues and, other things that have already been touched upon. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand we have Mr. Michael, who's Deputy Commissioner of Department of Public Works. And Mr. Michael, if you could let us know if Commissioner Siebert is interested in speaking.
I do know she had a conflict this evening, so I believe she's not on the call.
All right, you have the floor.
Well, I was not prepared for this evening. I did not think I was just going to be listening in, but
You do not have to speak. I just wanted to offer you the opportunity.
I think we've shared our opinions throughout all the committees, and I think that's where we're at. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you. So we're now faced with a speaker list of 19 people. We know we have a limit of 3 minutes, but 3 minutes times 19 is quite a bit. So there is no opposition to this motion. I would hope our speakers would take into account the need not to repeat, and it's perfectly okay to pass when your name is called. So Kimberly Blank, you're on this list, but I'm presuming you've said everything you needed to say. Is that right?
Correct. Thank you.
All right. So Paul Wolanski to be followed by Eric Schwartz.
Thank you very much. I've lived on Edgewood Drive, which is just around the corner from the Valley Glenville intersection for 27 years. And that's my survey. 27 years of using that intersection virtually every day. Now, it's not perfect, that's for sure, but it's not terrible either. And the alternative being proposed, which would be 3 traffic circles in a row, would be like running a gauntlet every morning. Now, ironically, the only problem that I have using Glenville Road every morning is at the traffic circle at Lake Avenue. The cars don't know when to enter it. They back up and they back up down Glenville. If we're talking about 3 of those in a row, I think it's going to be a very, very difficult situation, and it's not worth ruining the neighborhood for. State funding is fine. Okay, it's nice that the state is willing to pay for this, but a bad idea is a bad idea, even if paid for with other people's money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eric Schwartz to be followed by David Windreich.
I do not see Eric.
All right, so if Eric Schwartz appears, I will go back to him. David Windreich to be followed by Scott Moore. Are we good? You can go ahead and speak. David Windreich? No? Yeah, all right, we're told you're unmuted. Scott Moore, to be followed by Henry Orfis.
Can you hear me?
Is this Scott Moore?
Yes, this is Scott Moore.
Yes, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I've lived for about 8 years at 44 Glenville Road, which is right at the corner of Glenville and Valley. I am strongly opposed to funding this for 2 simple reasons. It's first is safety. The Rotaries will not help with safety. I've lived through them in Boston and other cities. I would say lower the speed limit. We've got the Eagle Hill School there. You've got a 20-mile-an-hour limit during school hours. Make it 20 all the time. You come down a steep hill from 2 ends with curves. It's if you slow people down, you're going to have a safer situation. Other people have done speed bumps. I'm sure with the hospital, that's probably problematic. When we lived in Princeton 20 years ago, they left the potholes on Alexander Road get bigger, and that slowed the people down. And but I don't think you'll want to do that. But you just got to slow the people down and have the police enforce it. The people drive too damn fast. The other point, it's been made by Kim, it's a bucolic, beautiful country road. The stone walls, the stone bridges, I have 2 of them. With the Horseneck Brook, it's going to get destroyed, and then you're going to have more flooding. So I just think we're at the point, no. Thank you.
Henry Orfis to be followed by Janetta Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I support cutting this money from the budget because based on the DPW's own data that was presented to District 7 by Mr. Windreich, these intersections meet or exceed the DPW's own traffic safety standards today. Over 100 residents of my district, as I understand it, have signed a petition opposing this project. And this situation is quite reminiscent of the situation that arose a few years ago when DPW, well-meaningly, I'm sure, proposed construction in District 6 in front of the Perrott Memorial Library, for which state funding was available. And the RTM, after hearing the objections from residents of District 6, voted not to proceed with that funding. My personal view is that if the residents of a district oppose a construction project in that district, the RTM should defer to the wishes of those residents unless there is an extremely obvious and critical safety need that has to be met. And there is no such critical safety need to be met here. So I therefore ask that this body respect the wishes of the District 7 residents and remove this funding from the budget. Thank you.
Janetta Benton to be followed by Elliot Benton.
There. Okay. Hello,
Yes, go ahead.
I am Janetta Rebold Benton. My husband Elliot and I have lived at 28 Glenville Road for 35 years. Our house is located at the intersection of the Glenville Road and Brookside Drive. I can verify the safety of the intersection because in those 35 years, I have never seen an accident there. And we have a direct view. All the windows on the back of the house look out on that intersection. We are extremely opposed to any of the several proposed changes to the intersection of Glenville Road and Brookside Drive. There is no need for anything, much less something so radical, costly, and disruptive. Each proposal is damaging to the aesthetic and character of Greenwich. I strongly urge you to preserve the town of Greenwich's coveted charm rather than diminish it with a series of unnecessary, obtrusive, inappropriate traffic circles. Our house and grounds, like those of others nearby, have been here for well over a century and deserve to be preserved in their original form as part of Greenwich's valuable historic heritage. As a distinguished professor of art history, I'm particularly sensitive to the aesthetic impact of the proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Does your husband wish to speak?
He's ready.
We had Elliot Benton also.
Yeah, come on. Oh my God, she needs more food, Jim.
Okay.
I can't get on.
Is Elliot Benton there?
Hello?
Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm Elliot Benton. As my wife just spoke, the property is at the intersection of Glenville Road and Brookside Drive. We're going to be the most directly affected residents. I would say that having sat on the Wetlands Agency for 13 years, I recognize brevity has great value. Unfortunately, we don't have a limit on people speaking. Many of you are property owners and therefore I hope sensitive to the potential for abuse of the town's right of eminent domain. 3 of the 4 alternatives under discussion here would in fact take our property. All 4 of them would cause an impact and diminish our quiet enjoyment of our more than 100-year-old home. There's no justification for the project as has been laid out. So in addition to the direct impactors to joiners from a wetlands perspective, the project has only been mentioned to the agency as I understand it. And it's almost sure to have an effect on the Horseneck Brook. We require prudent and feasible alternatives, and the most prudent and feasible alternative here is to do nothing. So I urge people to reject this, to accept the deletion of the money from the budget. Thank you.
Jill Cobbs, to be followed by Michael Spilo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, fellow RTM members and guests, I'm Jill Cobbs, RTM member of District 7 and Vice Chair of the Public Works Committee. I have a BS in Civil Engineering. Please vote yes to this amendment to reduce $175,000 funding to zero for the Brookside Drive at Glenville Road intersection improvements. It's situated in District 7. I have followed this project for the last year and a half. Unless one regards the hope of state reimbursement for construction as justification for such a project, there is truly very little reason to proceed. And by the way, the presumed reimbursement of $1.75 million from the state most likely will fall short as the scope has nearly doubled in size. To my knowledge, no neighbor has spoken publicly in favor of this project, but luckily for us, this project is still in its early stages. Again, please vote yes to the amendment. Thank you.
To let you know, David Winreich is now available. You tried him.
What was that? Michael Spilo?
No, David Wainwright, but who was there before?
All right. David Winreich?
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm David Winreich. I live at the Glenville Brookside Valley neighborhood. I'm in support of this motion, meaning I'm against funding this project. A number of my thoughts regarding the change of character in this neighborhood, the harmful environmental impact on Horseneck Brook, and strong local community opposition have been covered by some of the earlier speakers. So I wanted to spend my allocated time discussing safety and traffic level of service. I think Kim Blank mentioned that there are many intersections in Greenwich that have more accidents than, for example, Glenville and Brookside. She stated that there are 76 intersections with more accidents per million vehicles traveled. And according to state data, over a 5-year period, there were a total of only 9 accidents at Glenville Brookside, a little less than 1 accident every 6 months. This seems to me to be a very small number, and in fact it is. There were 62 intersections in Greenwich that had more accidents than Glenville Brookside. Net, the objective accident data shows the intersections are safe. In my conversations with DPW, they stated that spending capital to change the configuration of an intersection may not reduce accidents. Now, this seems logical to me. But that also means that there are many intersections where spending capital will reduce accidents. Shouldn't we as a community insist on spending capital and getting the most bang for the buck? Call it reduced accidents per dollar spent, instead of focusing on the 77th intersection on this list, where there is less than 1 accident every 6 months. Next, on level of service, as Kim mentioned, we all have anecdotal experiences regarding traffic. But DPW, in their only presentation to homeowners, showed that traffic level of service during peak traffic hours is, in their quotes, acceptable with some delay, not significant. That's DPW's own report card on these intersections. In fact, they then projected traffic out to 2039 and found that with no infrastructure changes, level of service will meet or exceed DPW's own standards. Finally, it seems to me that when making multi-million-dollar decisions involving people's safety, we must focus on hard data, not on anecdotal observations. The hard data shows these intersections are safe, and DPW's own level of service standard is met or exceeded with the current configuration of the intersections. To me, this confirms that funding should be withheld from this project and redirected to fix bigger, more pressing safety needs. I hope you agree.
Thank you. Michael Spilo to be followed by Lucy Krasner.
I'll try not to repeat what was said before. This reminds me of the North Street intersection that came up a few years ago. Unfortunately, at North Street, we spent the initial design funds before figuring out what a bad idea it was. Here we have an opportunity not to spend those funds. I think we should take it. I think there's a lot of bad issues with this idea, aside from what was mentioned, like putting a traffic circle into a hill doesn't seem like a very good idea. All in all, DPW's own data says it's not broken. I say let's not fix it. Thanks.
Lucy Krasner to be followed by Joseph Gatto.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll be super brief. I was very active in the Old Greenwich Historic Road votes that we wanted that to be accomplished, and it was very important to do so. So I simply want to say that when another district feels very, very strongly about something like this that will improve their area or not diminish the beauty of the area, we as the RTM should honor their request. And I urge everybody to vote yes to delete these construction funds.
Joseph Gatto to be followed by Susan Gatto.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Gatto. My wife Susan and I have been homeowners since 1994 at 146 Brookside Drive, very close to the intersection of Brookside with Glenville Road. As a homeowner who has lived with this intersection for over 27 years, I'm here to ask you to delete the $175,000 in funding for this DPW project. I learned of this project after joining a poorly attended public Zoom meeting on April 30th, 2020, just over a year ago, organized by DPW. The meeting was not handled by DPW presenters as a discussion. Instead, it was steered with a short presentation of 4 proposals, and then the presenter asking questions such as, which improvement proposal do you like best? Of that meeting, I've heard the DPW presenters characterize the neighborhood participants as overwhelmingly positive about the improvements proposed for these intersections. So here we are 1 year later, and now 153 neighbors who use these intersections daily stand in opposition to this same proposed DPW project, and they have all signed a petition to this effect. So why is this very large group of neighbors so opposed? Here's what it comes down to. When a proposed traffic construction project fails to meet the 2 essential tests for such a road construction project of 1, increasing safety, and 2, improving traffic flow, and if that proposed project also likely involves a public taking of private property through eminent domain, and potentially jeopardizes the environment and adversely affects the beauty of the neighborhood, then it becomes entirely understandable why there is such strident opposition of local residents to this proposed project. For these reasons, I humbly ask all of you to vote for the resolution to delete the $175,000 in funding for DPW on this project. Thank you.
Is Susan Gatto interested in speaking? Susan Gatto? All right. Oh, Susan Gatto, you have the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll be very brief. Obviously, I've lived here for 27 years too. I object to the proposed project for many reasons. The intersections are safe. We raised 4 children while living here. And when they were learning to drive, these were not intersections of concern to me. Many others in town were. The project's unnecessary for traffic flow reasons, as stated before, because the intersections meet criteria for actually newly constructed intersections. We live 40 feet from this intersection at Glenville and Brookside. So I can tell you that traffic rarely backs up, causing delays. With the new design, with traffic coming down Brookside and able to turn right, I think the delays would be worse, affecting all residents going through this intersection. And I'm also concerned about the environmental damage to Horseneck Brook and its wetlands, as well as the fact that the image that they showed of these brick and cement rotaries will turn what are now intersections and scenic roads in a residential neighborhood into rotaries more appropriate for downtown intersections. So please approve this motion to delete the $175,000 in funding. Thank you.
Chris Hikawa to be followed by Beth McGillivray. All right, I believe you're unmuted. You may begin. Chris Hikawa.
I think she has 2, it looks like she's there under 2 emails. Can you use the one where she has her hand raised?
Thank you. My name is Chris Hikawa, and I've lived in the area near these 2 intersections on Glenville for 20 years. Everyone else has made most of my points. So I just wish to say that Please do not make changes to a neighborhood when they are not warranted by safety data. And thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you. Beth McGillivray to be followed by James Matthews. Are we unmuted? Beth McGillivray, you have the floor.
Okay. Okay. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat, but I am another resident of over 20 years on off Glenville Road. I have 4 children and am constantly driving through this intersection at many different times throughout the day, including and not limited to various rush hours. I am also voting for this amendment to not add any additional funds for this intersection because I agree with all the previous statements made by various people. Thank you very much.
James Matthews to be followed by Christian Roth. All set. James Matthews.
Sorry about that. This is Jim Matthews. My wife Jenny and I have owned and live at 18 Calhoun Drive for the last 21 years. And, we agree strenuously that the funding for this project should be deleted. And my points have been made. And while I do like to hear myself speak like everybody else, the only point I'll accentuate is I think very few people in the neighborhood know about this. And if this keeps going, I do think that the community opposition is just getting started. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian Roth, followed by Susan Fahey.
Good evening, and good evening, Jim, my neighbor. I was actually prepared to speak to oppose defunding and to support this project, but it is clear that overwhelmingly my neighbors take the other side of it. And so what I'd like to do is actually to pivot and to echo the comments made by the gentleman at 44 Glenville Road about lowering the speed limit here. For those of us who do live in the Calhoun Drive Association, as Jim Matthews and I do, these roads are fast, whether you're a driver, whether you're merging into the roads, whether you're a dog walker, a pedestrian, or the like. I found myself attracted to this proposal because it was something that I thought would achieve a broader objective, which was actually traffic calming. It's clear my neighbors have arguments that are very persuasive against funding this project, but I do think there's a broader question back to DPW and to the town, which is how we change this from being the Glenville Motor Speedway into being roads which are more appropriate in terms of sharing the roads with those who are pedestrians and drivers. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Susan Fahey to be followed by Brooks Harris.
Hi, Tom. I think I will cede my time as I think most have been covered. I was asked to speak as a D11 rep as we went through the same thing on Fairfield, Parsonage, and North Street, where it was like money looking for a problem through state grants. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Brooks Harris. All right. And our last speaker on the list is Suzanne Sherwin. We don't have a. Pardon me?
I see Rich Reynolds' hand up, but I don't see any Susan Sherwin.
Susan Sherwin, can you raise your hand, please? But we got to go with the speaker list.
She's not with him.
All right, so that is the end of the speaker list. That's the end of our discussion on this. Will the district, all right, so if you are in favor of cutting the $175,000 for this Brookside Drive project, you should vote yes on the District 7 motion to delete this line item. If you want to leave it in there, you vote no. Will the district tabulators please mark your voting cards? District 7 motion to delete $175,000. Proceed to poll your delegation. We will give a 5-minute time period to conduct that vote. And If it is not completed, we are going to then continue. All right, we're done. Am I on? All right. The 5-minute period is up for that vote. We are going to continue. And the very next item is another motion. So we have, this is the Greenwich Avenue intersection improvement. And we have Lucia Jansen, Chair of our Budget Overview Committee, with a motion directed to this item.
The BOC is offering to cut Greenwich Avenue intersection improvements, Department number 312, account number 960, MOC code 22320 for the full $500,000.
Once again, that being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second and is now before us. This is a motion to delete the entire $500,000. Lucia Jansen.
All right, so we had invited James Michael once again, the DPW Deputy Commissioner, to address the proposed funding for additional Greenwich Avenue bump outs. Michael's informed the BOC that the funding was similar to the intersection at Elm Street. Elm Street was expected to be finished in June, after which they would look at making similar changes to many other intersections, which at this time is identified to be 7 intersections. He acknowledged that the Arch Street intersection presented some of the biggest safety issues, but that it was also the most complicated to address, so it was not going to be addressed by this budget item. There had been no decision about which intersection this funding would be spent on. The committee raised many questions about additional bump outs, including no overall plan for Greenwich Avenue changes, lost parking spaces with no compensatory parking plan, and no analysis of the Elm Street implementation with traffic study, pedestrian flow, and what have you. A suggestion was made that the Elm Street bump out should be completed, and then an assessment made whether residents like the bump out, whether they accomplished the safety goals before further bump outs were planned or funded. It was used the word pause. Let's take a pause before we move on. It was noted that there are many stakeholders involved: retailers, restaurants, residents, visitors, traffic, pedestrians. Given that there are 7 other intersections proposed, the BOC felt we should know all impact before embarking on those other intersections. It also has, importantly, a BET condition, because the BET agrees that there is insufficient information, and they are requiring the DPW department to produce a report with a detailed plan and associated costs with Greenwich Avenue. It also requires DPW to conduct public hearings that will include the stakeholders described earlier. BET conditions, as we say often on the BOC, eliminates the RTM involvement with a vote. So we may be able to attend a public hearing and give 3 minutes, but the vote is going to be appropriated away if we approve this. So we wanted to vote on the direction of these intersections. And so we wanted to also mention again, by charter, the RTM supposed to be the final decision. We on the RTM understand when there is an emergency, conditions are necessary, but this is not an emergency and it's too much at stake with the avenue. So we vote, the BOC voted 9-1 to support the cut. District 4 and 6 voted no. District 4 likes the Elm Street bump out design, and District 6 supported traffic calming measures. District 5 abstained because he did not want this to turn into relitigating the police on the avenue. Thank you.
All right, I'm about to call for the Finance Committee report, but Mr. Spilo, I don't see Public Works here. Is that correct? I see your name listed as an individual. No committee report?
No, that's not correct. We did take a vote on this.
Your committee, so you have a committee report?
I do.
All right, so Brooks Harris, Vice Chair of Finance, to be followed by Mr. Spilo.
Finance took up this proposal, and appearing before us were the first selectmen and other town officials in support and arguing for the $500,000 to continue construction of bump outs on Greenwich Avenue. This money would pay for the next 2 to 3 proposed bump outs. Several Finance Committee members questioned whether the entire amount should be allocated at this time. Other members argued we should see reviews of the Elm Street bump out, which will be completed shortly before we spend more money on these bump outs. The points that were made in support of the bump outs were that they improve safety on the avenue by slowing traffic, by improving visibility, and by making the crossing shorter. It was argued Greenwich Avenue has some of the most dangerous intersections in Greenwich, and it was claimed that bump outs are attractive, although that's a subjective judgment, and I'm not sure universally shared. The points against this project were safety improvements and aesthetic benefits are uncertain, so why not see how the community reacts to Elm Street bump outs before broadening the others? And also people noted that this would reduce parking, which is already a critical item on the avenue. Finance Committee voted 291 against removing this expenditure from the budget. District 7 and 9 voted yes because they wanted more details on the safety improvements, as well as judging the reaction to the first bump out, which is almost complete. And D2 abstain because they preferred a reduction rather than an elimination of this amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Michael Spilo with the Public Works Committee report, to be followed by Peter Berg with the Land Use report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Public Works Committee has discussed the issue of sidewalk bump outs many times, even before the appropriation for Elm Street last year. Last year, a motion to cut Elm Street intersection bump outs failed 6-6-0. This year, those in favor of the cut cited a desire to see the results and final costs of the Elm Street intersection before starting on other intersections. This is in addition to concerns raised previously about lacking a comprehensive plan for Greenwich Avenue, especially given the potential of the loss of as many as 40 parking spots. It's also noted that most Greenwich Avenue merchants depend heavily on customers coming in from beyond walking distance, so comprehensive parking plan is very important. Our vote was 7-4 in favor of this cut. Members from districts 3, 9, 6, and 10 opposed the cut, citing aesthetics and a desire to move quickly on improving pedestrian safety. Member from District 1 abstained, wanting to know which street would be next. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Berg with the Land Use Committee report.
So the Land Use Committee did take this item up. We took it up jointly with Finance. So I don't have a further report than what you heard from Brooks Harris. Our vote on this item was 0 in favor, 12 against the motion to cut. 0-12.
Thank you. All right. Discussion on this item. We do have a speaker list of 7 people, but before we get into it, one of our in-person attendees has asked to be recognized. Tom Broadhurst, District 5, in order to make a motion to further limit debate. Mr. Moderator, I move to limit debate to 2 minutes per speaker per motion. And is that for the balance of the evening? That is for the balance of the evening. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to limit debate for the balance of the meeting to 2 minutes per speaker per item. Is that what you said? Yes, sir. All right. The motion to limit debate is not itself debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. In the first instance, I will call for a raised hand vote, and hopefully, we'll try and figure out what it looks like, and if we have to take a more accurate vote, we will do that. But it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. So if we could lower all the hands at this time. All those in favor of limiting debate for the balance of the evening to 2 minutes per speaker per item, please raise your hand. Can someone count, see that what the count is? I'll count in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know who I counted.
120, 121.
We got 121, and we got at least 20 more, so that's 141. All right, lower the hands, please. All those opposed to this 2-minute limit on debate, please raise your hands now. 1, 2. Just 2. What do you got?
24.
24, so about 26. So that is a 2/3 majority. So for the balance of the evening, our speakers are limited to 2 minutes when they are recognized. All right, the first individual, Michael Spilo, did you care to speak further on this?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. I just want to say that the safety of sidewalk bump outs is undetermined, and we do have bump outs at Fawcett Place and Greenwich Avenue, and yet we've had several pedestrian accidents there in the last 5 years. We've also have by Hamilton Avenue School, we have an intersection with bump outs that has significant accidents. So I think the jury is definitely out on their safety.
All right, Phil Dodson, to be followed by Bill Lewis. Bill Dodson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We only recently learned that Greenwich Avenue intersection improvements are being considered for all the avenue intersections, not just 1 or 2 as we previously thought. The next intersection to be worked on is yet to be identified, and DPW tells us they don't even know which one will be next. We were told it will not be Havemeyer Arch because that will be the most challenging and costly one to do. The problem with this overall project is there has never been any actual plan or rendering to show us exactly what Greenwich Avenue would look like with all these drastic changes. The ongoing Elm Street project sustained substantial cost overruns as plans changed and were not fully disclosed. Funding of $200,000 was initially provided for 2 intersections, but the cost for Elm Street alone quickly rose to $300,000 before we knew it. The main reason was the decision to raise the intersection requires additional costly reworking of storm drains all around the intersection. This is a big cost factor for any additional intersections. The use of other accounts to meet the cost overruns from the storm water account and the ADA account complicates it for us as far as trying to follow the costs. Outdoor dining with plans to make it a permanent feature has eliminated 60 avenue parking spots. We also lost 5 parking spaces with the construction at Elm Street. There is also no plan to address the avenue parking problem made even worse by the loss of so many spaces. DPW plans to use this $500,000 budget item to take construction as far as it can for 2 or 3 unidentified additional intersections. DPW can only do this by continuing to use additional funding from the other accounts as was done at Elm Street. Before any of these projects can take place, municipal improvement status is required from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Yet here we are being asked to approve construction costs without MI approval.
All right, thank you very much. Your time has expired. There should be a clock on the video to guide you in the time limit. Bill Lewis to be followed by Dan Quigley.
Thank you very much. I support the bump out pause. From my observation as an East Elm Street resident, the bump outs are causing chaos and confusion for drivers and pedestrians alike. The drivers feel squeezed and confused by all the curving stonework, and pedestrians can't figure out whether they should dogleg out toward what I take to be the intended crosswalk or angle the other way for a shorter crossing. We should definitely wait to see how this plays out over the coming months before committing to more of these installations at the other intersections, especially Lewis Street, which I think is where they're headed next. In fact, the history of Lewis Street, the Lewis Street intersection, by the way, is interesting and troubling. For decades, there was a police officer there, but our leaders, including a lifelong expert on Lewis Street, removed the officer and thereby created the single most dangerous intersection in the town of Greenwich, according to the data presented in connection with the Glenville Road project. Now we're told the only way to make the Lewis Street intersection safe again is to immediately build bump outs. The point being, if safety is truly a concern, they can put a police officer back out there as we await the public's full reaction to the Elm Street bump outs. So bottom line is, I would say, let's save this 500,000 for now, save it for textbooks and school ceilings or other constructive and necessary things of that nature. Thank you.
Dan Quigley, to be followed by Brian Rainey.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As a longtime resident of downtown Greenwich, my family's proximity to the avenue is one of the main reasons we chose to remain where we are. Whether walking our son to Havemeyer Park or taking a daily walk together, the avenue is central to our daily lives. The bump outs will provide pedestrians with added measures that will put safety first. The speed bump elevation will provide added protection against excess speeding from oncoming traffic. The walkways will be more clearly defined, allowing for easier pedestrian passage across the avenue. And the narrower driving lanes will require more deliberate pace from drivers. This will mean safer crosswalks for our elderly residents and all people with disabilities. It's worthy to note that unlike Brookside Drive, according to DPW data, the intersection at Lewis and Greenwich Avenue has had the highest number of minor accidents per million cars of any intersection in the study. It's also worthy to note that Alan Gunsberg, chairman of the First Selectmen's Committee of People with Disabilities, and Police Chief Hebe have both publicly supported the project on grounds of increased safety. Reduced parking has also been mentioned as an additional concern. However, the town is speaking with merchants currently to rectify any loss of parking by prioritizing spaces on the avenue for customers and making it easier for workers to park in municipal lots. Over 100 employee parking permits in town lots are being offered right now to avenue merchants for employee parking. Another item I'd like to address is the idea of giving a pause to the bump outs. I think a pause makes sense, but probably, I suppose the difference is that I believe the natural moment to pause is prior to Arch Street, which will require more complex engineering and design work. Change is never easy, and I think those who oppose the budget reduction, who support this budget reduction, do so because to them, change represents erasing the past. That is understandable. However, I see this more as an evolution. Just as people evolve, so do our buildings, our architecture, our streets, and our communities. And I urge my fellow RTM colleagues to vote against the removal of funds toward further intersection enhancements on the avenue. Thank you.
Brian Rainey, to be followed by Carol Zarilli. Is Brian Rainey with us? He's a panelist.
Yeah, sorry. Mr. Moderator?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, too often we end up with in for a penny, in for a pound thinking, the sunk cost fallacy, and we have an opportunity to stop and consider what we're doing and whether we like it here. I would hate for us to end up with buyer's remorse and a whole slew of intersections, especially on Greenwich Avenue, our crown jewel, that we actually don't like. So I'm in support of the pause.
Carol Zarilli, to be followed by Beth McGillivray.
Ready for me, Tom?
Yes.
Carol Zarilli. Yes, I'm in favor of a pause on the bump outs until we can see how it fares out at the Elm Street intersection. I kind of observed a few very concerning things Last week I took a ride down from the top of Greenwich Avenue to the bottom. The outdoor dining is fine, but I think it adds to a lot of the traffic issues on the avenue, along with numerous jaywalkers. And when I reached the Elm Street intersection, it was no different. Cars were doing a rolling stop into the intersection, as well as bikers and pedestrians were kitty cornering the intersection as if there was still a policeman there. So I would like a pause on, let's see how it works. If it's great, then we can go forward. Thank you very much.
Beth McGillivray?
Hi, I would like to address the parking issue on Greenwich Ave. This morning, I walked up and down Greenwich Avenue, counting spots to understand our parking situation. We have lost a total of 61 parking spots due to the new bump out and restaurants on the avenue. Now our total available spots for parking has dwindled to 325 regular spots and 12 handicap spots. With the addition, as I learned tonight, of up to 7 more bump outs, one can expect the loss of almost 50 more spots. Please note that these spots are premium parking spots in the heart of Greenwich Avenue. These lost parking spots affect merchants, patrons, and residents. If parking becomes difficult and burdensome, Greenwich Avenue will lose its appeal and gain a reputation. Don't go to Greenwich, you can never find a parking spot. Once that becomes the old adage, it will be hard to change that reputation. We are moving from a situation of approximately 400 parking spots to less than 300. The bump outs are not needed. Greenwich Avenue does not need any more construction, nor do we need to spend millions of dollars on bump out construction projects. I would like to note that our sidewalks are in excellent level condition without holes, cracks, and other impediments for walking. The intersections are well organized with wide downward sloping and visibly marked handicap access egress. Please vote against more bump outs and less premium parking. Thank you.
It's not quite the same as Yogi Berra's, nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. All right, that is the end of our speaker list. I am now going to call for the vote on the BOC motion to cut $500,000 from the Greenwich Avenue intersection. We will run a 5-minute clock, but we're not going to run music to start because we're going to have a speaker telling us about the Reimagine Greenwich Committee. Is that the name of it? All right. So if you are in favor of cutting the $500,000, you vote yes on this BOC motion to delete. If you are in favor of leaving that money there, you should vote no. So we'll start the 5-minute clock. With respect to this Selectmen's Committee on Reimagine Greenwich, Lauren Rabin, our select person, is the chair. I know. And she is with us. I'm just recognizing who is here with us. And Josh Brown, RTM member from District 1, serves on that committee. And Mr. Brown is going to give us a status report. Well, you have 5 minutes. Or...
I'll yield my time.
Mr. Broderick might object, but
you might. Mr. Moderator, fellow members, just wanted to give you a brief update. I am on the Reimagine Greenwich Committee. As was indicated, Ms. Rabin is doing a fabulous job, has done a fabulous job of bringing people together and really causing a very dynamic discussion about what we can be doing to look forward into what could Greenwich do for its residents, for its businesses, to support a very vibrant environment. You may have heard about putting some flags up or banners up to help celebrate the town, help elevate what is important in Greenwich. That's still a work in process. You may have recently been hearing some things about a Free Music Friday, the brand new idea down at the Greenwich Common, kind of an hour, 2 hours of music to enjoy your Friday lunch break. Trying to figure out some food options, things of that nature. So there'll be more coming on that. There's been a lot of work by Jim Michaels and DPW looking at parking options, because as we've heard tonight, lots of challenges and issues with that, talking with landlords about opening up maybe their parking garages, seeing if there's a way to, get some cars near the avenue, maybe off the avenue, make that more attractive. We've talked about some kind of a trolley or a bus, that would help shepherd people around Greenwich Avenue from maybe Down Beach parking lot area. You've seen the barriers, the bump outs for giving restaurants a place to have some additional people. That'll continue. New ideas also popped up about an art show similar to what's been going on at the Bruce Museum, really celebrating art in the town and having a kind of a destination for that. This is really a town-wide, so while the focus is really been on central Greenwich, it is really looking at all of town and looking at options for all of the areas. So more to come on that. My ask is get involved. Send some ideas. If you have some things that you'd like to see done, please forward ideas on to that. Contribute. There's a fundraising arm, a 501c3 that donations can be made to, because some of these things do cost money and they're not in the budget. So getting some public-private partnership going would be a great thing. And then lastly, support your locals. Come out and support the local stores. Go shopping, have a nice meal. Get out and celebrate our local businesses and see each other now that we're kind of coming out of our cave. So hopefully that's helpful. Reach out to me if you have other questions, any ideas. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have the result of the vote on the District 7 motion to delete the $175,000 for Brookside Drive improvements. Those in favor of that cut, 195, opposed 12, abstaining 9. That motion is carried. So we are still awaiting a 5-minute expiration. All right, so we will await the result of that vote, of course, but we're continuing now. So we were in 312, DPW Highway, Streets and Bridges. Our next category is 315, Board of Ed projects done by DPW. 345, DPW building, construction and maintenance. And here again, we have a BOC motion addressed to the Hamel Rink facility improvements. Lucia Jansen, Chair of our Budget Overview Committee.
Good evening. The motion by the BOC is to reduce 900,000 of the 950,000 for the Hamel Ice Rink.
All right, that motion is now before us to delete $900,000 from that line item. Lucia Jansen.
This capital item was really complicated. It was like an onion peeling back the layers. First, it must be said and emphasized that the BOC supports the Hamel Rink improvements. We have many members, including myself, that have thoroughly enjoyed the rink for years and use it for recreational purposes within the Byram Park neighborhood. We also want to note that in previous town budgets, the BOC has voted in favor of the $400,000 in order to receive 30% construction drawings. The reason why this caught the BOC's attention was because the project rose from 4.5 million to 17 million in fiscal year 20, and the proponents were requesting for the remaining 70% of the construction design drawings before we had received any information on the 30%. So the BOC spent a great deal of time on this appropriation. In fact, we devoted 2 BOC meetings with different town representatives to gather and understand the facts, both on the operating and capital costs. We also conducted our own research and stumbled across all kinds of information that was not in the project worksheet, such as the historic nature of the property and the sacred area of the park with trees memorializing veterans in the Byram community. Many BOC members also attended the SLAM presentation, which are the architects hired to do the construction drawings. That was held last week after all of the RTM committee meetings. They gave even more information that was unknown, including, surprisingly, a new access road 24 feet wide. Perhaps even the requirement or of the 5 options presented, 3 would require new sewer lines that would be installed, needed to be dug up across the baseball field. And an entire reorganization of the park, really impacting those precious trees memorializing the veterans. All of this with no details and no costs mentioned. Through our discussion, it was clear that an exceptionally large number of facts are unknown. They are unknown not only to the town, but to the BET and the proponents of the project. There are many stakeholders involved externally, including the baseball players that use the field, the Byram Veterans Association, the McKinney Terrace with senior citizens facing the green space, the dog walkers, the abutting neighbors on the streets from Western Junior Highway and Sherman Street. And I went there and took personally pictures, and all of those stakeholders showed up on the same day with a beautiful sunny day that was outside. They're there. Then there are internal rink stakeholders with the public school hockey teams, the private school hockey teams, figure skating, public lessons. Do we know the allocation of all that ice time with these different stakeholders? No, we do not. Mr. Siciliano, the Director of Parks and Rec, confirmed there is no public-private partnership, no business plan, no staffing plan, no pro forma financial statements at this time. Mr. Siciliano's next step is to file a municipal improvement, a preliminary municipal improvement. But again, the request tonight is to fully fund the remaining 70% of the construction drawings. Questions were raised about the financial expectations of running the rink, especially as it moves into this commercial arena with hockey leagues. Further, was the rink expected to be self-sustaining? We don't know. We don't know the subsidy if there is one. Siciliano characterized the notion that the Hamel ice rink would be financially self-sustaining. Several BOC members commented that the ice rink is changing focus with many enhanced building and ice features, specifically for hockey play, which is a narrow town constituency. BOC members noted that municipal ice rinks are difficult with labor costs and, more importantly, work rules, because the hockey rink is open from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Not a good match with the labor union contracts. The Parks and Rec assumption is that previous users of the Dorothy Hamel rink who have gone to other facilities would return to the proposed rink, but did not offer any statements of intent or commitments from any of these parties to use the new rink. Parks and Rec expects to operate a new rink year-round. and provided information that the current 6-month operational revenue is 600,000 and that they expect 12-month revenue to be 700,000 to 800,000. Parks and Rec was unable to provide any costs associated with moving to a 12-month program. And they were unable to identify any specific programs or users who would be added with the 12-month program. Bill Drake stated, who is the chairman of the user committee and also the BET liaison, that there are 3 main users of the proposed rink: hockey players, and hockey players. So they're from the Greenwich Public School hockey team, they're from the Greenwich Academy hockey team, and they're from the Greenwich Country Day hockey team. Bill mentioned he could see these organizations committing to long-term revenue agreements for ice time. Questions were asked about the competitive status of the rink in terms of the facility and amenities planned compared to alternatives like Chelsea Piers and Twin Rinks. Questions were also raised about how the cost of operations would be competitive given town employee wage and benefit costs. The questions then shifted to the neighborhood impact. District 3 and District 4 members who abut the Hamel Rink property.
7 minutes.
I'm done?
Yep.
All right. And with that, I've been given the hook. The motion is to and as a sign of good faith, even though they didn't need the money, we kept $50,000 just as a sign of good faith that we support the project.
Thank you. All right, we still do have a limit on committee reports of 7 minutes. Mr. Broadhurst did not have that answer to that, but Brooks Harris with Finance Committee report.
Okay, we're more cold-hearted than the BOC, so we took up cutting all 950,000. But okay, so phase 1 is going on right now, and phase 1 hasn't been completed, and there's a lot of information that the committee needs in order to evaluate the continuing progress of this program. Town officials and Bill Drake, who chairs the Dorothy Hamel Users Committee, spoke in favor of the expenditure. The town has already approved phase 1 planning, and it's expected to be completed by the end of this year. The reason they're seeking phase 2 is because when that funding runs out, they want to roll immediately into phase 2. And what we considered in finance was whether to approve that money right now or to potentially approve that money after we see what comes back from phase 1, as well as some other questions we had. So the points against the cut were that if we approve the funding today, they don't need to come back for an interim. Usually we're pretty opposed to interim requests, but interim requests make a lot of sense when an expenditure isn't needed for a period of time and there's additional information that would be useful to decide on the expenditure or not. Also, there's great support in the community for the rink, and that's absolutely true. And there's great support on the finance committee for the rink, but that doesn't mean that we need to proceed without the information that we need. It was also stated that it may be difficult to raise private money without more detailed plans. And in order to get those more detailed plans, we need to approve the second phase. And I can't judge whether that's correct or not. Points in favor of the cut were there's really no operating budget. And I think at the very least, if we want to approve these kind of major expenses, we have a right to understand how much this is going to cost us over time. I mean, a lot of us like skating. My kids have used the rink, but is it going to be a couple $100,000 or a couple million? What's it going to be? We'd like to see that. The $17 million estimated construction cost may be quite uncertain, and we expect that between now and when they actually need the money for phase 2, we might get some more details on that. Everyone here is familiar that often when we approve a project, between the time when that approval starts and the project gets built, the construction costs increase dramatically. And I think by allowing a little bit more time, maybe we can get a better feel for what that figure is going to be. And the group also explicitly expressed an interest in entertaining an interim approval if this is defeated. Finance Committee voted 9-3-0 to recommend removing this expenditure from the budget. D4, D6, D8 committee members voted no and did not want to delay the funding request. They were afraid that if we vote no, it will delay the project, although as stated, we encourage them to come back for an interim if that's appropriate. I think this is a kind of the classic example from a finance committee perspective on the kind of project that really needs some projections associated with it. I mean, this is going to be a very big expense. We've got a lot of other projects that we want to do. I know there are a lot of other projects that aren't in the 15-year plan right now. And so I think we have an obligation to, the people who support those other projects to really have a little bit more details on this before we pass it. And so that was primarily why finance voted to cut this funding at this time. Thank you.
All right, we have one more committee report, but before I call on that, I have the result of the vote of the VOC motion to delete the $500,000 for the Greenwich Avenue improvements. Those in favor, 133, opposed 80, abstaining 3. That motion to delete has carried. Catherine LaBalbo now with the Parks and Recreation Committee report on the Hamel-Rink item.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Park and Rec Committee took up the Dorothy Hamel item with the understanding that BOC had taken it up the previous week. For some clarification purposes, the ice skating rink right now is staffed wholly by part-time salaries. Temporary salaries, 2019-2020 actual was $207,000, almost $208,000. As far as revenue, the skating rink brings in approximately $500,000 a year, primarily in rental of ice time. Admission from the public is about $50,000. It makes almost nothing on concessions, and skate sharpening is a very small budget items. So we took up, let's see, so the request, we decided to take up a motion to reduce it mirroring the VOC motion, leaving in the 50,000. Ultimately, the vote was 4 in favor and 8 against the reduction. The director felt that planning, outreach, and consensus would be achieved in the 6 months for him to go to a public hearing and site plan approval process in 2022 to achieve an MI for the project. But there were lots of items that were brought up, including the number of different users and user groups on that site, including the Byron Memorial. And if anybody has the opportunity to attend the Byron Memorial service, it is probably one of the most heartfelt, meaningful services one can attend in this town. So I highly recommend that. A number of concerns were raised that would fall aside the land use process, including phasing, taking offline Straza Field while Western Middle School fields continue to be down. Fiscal and operational management plan, would salaries remain temporary? Would it be temporary staff to continue? Would the rink be able to be open for 12 months of the year? And what kind of public access would be allowed to the facility? Would it be, wholly privatized effectively? In recognition, the director, in recognition of the number of concerns, and that essentially by approving the funds, this might fall from the visibility of the RTM, the director agreed to the inclusion of an ex officio non-voting member from the RTM Park and Rec Committee, joining the working group to be a liaison as it moves through the process. Those voting against the motion saw the desire to seek and improve rink, but we're not comfortable to see it move beyond 30% without pumping the brake and revisiting the items when outstanding questions on severe deficiency in zoning, parking, vehicular access, how the memorial will be preserved, neighborhood impact were all addressed. Those in favor noted that the high competition for capital projects meant that in the remaining years, we might not know what's in the future that this project and its design fees would be competing for.
Thank you. I believe that completes our committee report.
Mr. Moderator, I'm sorry. Public Works took this up as well.
Michael Spilo, Chair of Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Public Works heard from Mr. Drake of the BET in his dual capacity as proponent of the ice rink and from Superintendent Manelli and Director Siciliano. We were told the ice rink is currently operational, although quite old, there are currently no issues. I won't go through all of this. We were also heard about a plan for a new access road from Western Junior Highway. We were told some members were very concerned that designs would hamper the existing memorial site. Not to repeat what else was said, we voted 5-7-0 against the motion to cut, with the districts 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10 voting against the cut, wanting the remaining of the design funds budgeted immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further committee reports on this? All right. We do have a speaker list, some for and some against. I don't see any representation from any department. So if Mr. Siciliano would like to speak, or Mr. Drake, if you could somehow get word to either Kimberly Stizano or Alexis Vulgaris, perhaps, we will recognize you. I will start down on our speaker list, and again, remind our speakers that there is a 2-minute limit in effect. First speaker will be Tom Eckert, to be followed by David Wold. All right, so we're.
Hello?
Yes, is that Tom?
You can
Eckert?
hear me. Okay, thank you. This is Tom Eckert.
Thank you.
I understand tonight's meeting is about the budget and financials, but this particular item is far more important than money. I have seen the conceptual plans for this new 42,000 square foot rink. At least 3 of the proposed sites sit directly on or in front of the Veterans Memorial trees at the Eugene Morlott Memorial Park. There appears to be tremendous confusion as to the new rink's location. The memorial tree dedicated to Private First Class Donald Rapace, uncle to my 3 stepchildren, would be jeopardized by the proposed plans, as well as the memorial trees of the 12 other brave men from Byram who lost their lives serving this country. I would like to read an excerpt from a citation from the Department of the United States Army. Awarded Bronze Star Medal with 1st Oak Leaf Cluster. Date of action, 21st March 1969, Republic of Vietnam. For heroism in connection with military actions involving conflict with an armed hostile force in the Republic of Vietnam, Private First Class Rapace distinguished himself by valorous actions on 21st March 1969 while serving as a rifleman with Company D, 3rd Battalion, 39th Infantry on a night ambush patrol near Vinh Yên. After sighting an enemy element approaching, Private Rapace courageously exposed himself to warn his comrades of the approaching danger. During the ensuing battle, Private First Class Rapace was critically wounded, but moved through the hail of enemy fire to aid the other casualties until he succumbed to his wounds. Private First Class Rapace's personal bravery and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest tradition of the military service and reflect a great credit upon himself, the 9th Infantry Division, and the United States Army, by direction of the President under the provisions of Executive Order 11046. This is just one of the stories behind the 13 memorial trees at the Eugene Morlott Memorial Park. There are 12 other stories that are equally moving. I urge the RTM before approving any additional funding to please remember the sacrifices that these fallen heroes and the families they left behind made to our country, and to please do all you can to honor their memory, regardless of the committee's desires to not miss a season of ice time. Thank you.
Thank you. Before calling upon Mr. Wald, I'm alerted that this is a public works project, so I offer Mr. Michael, or if Commissioner Siebert desires to speak, again, if you could get word to Kimberly Susano or Alexis Vulgaris. All right, Mr. Michael, you're a panelist, so if you could just let us know if you'd like to speak on this. Mr. Michael, are you there?
Yeah, I think from what I understand, Joe Siciliano might be trying to get in touch to speak on this one.
Well, he did get in touch and he referred us to you. Al Manelli? Mr. Manelli, are you with us?
Al is listening in. I'm not sure if he's been promoted yet or not, but
we're working on it. How are we? Mr. Manelli, would you like to unmute? No? All right, so we'll continue. Mr. Michael, if you want to coordinate, again, principal opponent, which I think would be the department head, and Mr. Siciliano is referring us to Public Works. You would be entitled to that time. All right, David Wald, to be followed by Molly Salibi. Oh, Alan Manelli, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, do you care to speak at this time? I could recognize you later. What is your preference?
Yeah, I can speak at, Mr. Moderator, I can speak at this time.
All right, so you have up to 10 minutes as the principal opponent to this motion to cut the $900,000. Alan Manelli.
Alan Manelli, Superintendent of Construction, Department of Public Works. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The funds for the $950,000 is a continuance of the design of the project, as was already spoken. The funds for the 30% design have been appropriated, and we are in under contract with a SLAM Collaborative, our architects that are helping us through this process. Last Wednesday was the first committee meeting where we presented 5 different options that the committee's considering. All of them are going to be protected of the memorial trees throughout. The reason for this project is a continuance that is expected that if a final site plan approval from P&Z is gained in the first quarter of 2022, this will allow the project to continue without abatement, waiting for the 2022 July budget, which would be next year's budget. So that's the reason why it's been appropriated in this year's budget. Again, this is an important project to the town, and we are moving through as fast as we can and with all consideration to all parties in the area. Thank you.
All right, thank you. David Wald, to be followed by Molly Salibi.
There is no David Wald, but there is a David Wald is nodding, and so he should raise his hand.
All right, we don't see a last name Wald, W-O-L-D. If you are in the, if you are attending this meeting, could you please raise your hand to help us locate you? Meanwhile, Molly Salibi, be followed by Dan Ozisman.
Molly Salibi, I ask you not to vote to remove the appropriation for Dorothy Hamill skating rink. I don't support my BOC motion on this. To me, there's two conversations going on. We have a municipal rink. It's owned and operated by the town. We've had it for 50 years. I want it to continue another 50 years. I believe that the new and improved rink will probably offer even more efficiencies in terms of operations and cost, and probably last even longer. We're making a capital investment. I believe if the price tag were a lot lower, we wouldn't be having so much discussion over it. It's something that we own. It is named for an Olympic gold figure skating champion, and the drive there for an Olympic gold and silver ice hockey medal, marks of distinction for the town of Greenwich. I totally support the memorial preservation. The drawings show that that will remain intact. There's this conversation about, user groups and fees. The rink sustains itself, it always has, and there is no evidence that it won't continue to do so in the future. This is an amenity for the town, and it's about values and standards and what we want for our town, in my view. Lastly, I am part of a newly formed fundraising committee for public-private partnerships through a private foundation. And we are going to be working on developing partnerships. We need construction drawings to take to major donors. That's very helpful. We are always going to be competing for capital, and we'll have competition for other capital projects in next fiscal year. We've already invested funds. There's still plenty of time from March through June to continue on. Why stagnate? Let's keep moving. Things move way too slowly in this town, in my view, when it comes to capital improvements. Thank you.
All right, so I think we have found David Wald. David? Mr. Wald? Mr. Wald, could you unmute yourself and you have the floor?
Can you hear me now?
Well, I heard something. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is David Wald, and I've been living here in Greenwich for the last 30 years, and I'm a member of the Bar and Vets. I request that the RTM hold back the requested 900,000 from the Parks and Rec until we have seen some existing drawings of the site and location at the current property. The sole focus on the Park and Rec and the committee has been to introduce this to the Eugene Morlow Memorial Park, a park that was already established in the 1970s as a open space park for the citizens of Greenwich. 2 years ago, I had an exchange with Parks and Rec about the newly work done in the middle of the Veterans Grove located in the same park. In the exchange, we found documentation that the National Park Service has stipulated the Eugene Morlow Park as a dedicated open parkland, and it should remain that way. We also found recently that documentation from 1990 about expanding the parking lot for the door so that there was additional parking for the Dorothy Hamill skating rink was done under a condition that the Parks and Rec would not request any further expansion of any blacktop area or buildings in the park. This was agreed by Frank Keegan with Diane Fox in the PNC in September 1991. From the drawings that we saw in September last year, Parks and Rec wanted to place the new building from SLAM, about 30% of it covering the Memorial Veterans area. It was then changed that the alternatives will be presented.
Mr. Wald, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We do have a 2-minute limit in effect, and we're going to have to move on. Would you like to quickly wrap up?
Okay. I would just like to say that in the Wednesday's presentation, there was nothing there that really referred to the building. It was a focus on an exit road that I understand RTM has never approved any funding for. So again, I asked the RTM to look into what happened to the construction at the current property before they start appropriating another $900,000 to this project.
All right, thank you very much. Dan Osismeyer to be followed by Michael Spilo.
Thank you. I urge people to vote for this reduction from 950 to 50,000. The first thing I want to talk about is this whole question of delay. The fact is that projects often take time. In fact, COVID over the last year has slowed many things down. But the RTM has never delayed this project. And if we reduce the funding from 950 to 50,000 and are open to an interim, the RTM will create no delay in this project. Many of the people arguing against this cut have focused on potential delays. Al Manelli at the BOC meeting indicated that the 30% drawings have not even begun yet. The user committee had its first, actually was convened on April 12th of this year, and I'm not even sure if they had their first meeting. So from a delay point of view, the 30% spending will not even be finished until the first quarter of next year, 2022. So even without an interim, the delay might be a month or two. With an interim, there would be no delays. The second thing I'd like to talk about is, how I look at this from an RTM member. I'm not going to go through all the discussions about the uncertainties and the lack of information. But ultimately, as a member of the RTM, if you vote yes for this, you are approving 100% construction bid documents. These are not conceptual documents. These are not renderings. These are not site plans. These are not anything like that. These are documents that can go to builders, contractors for firm bids. I don't think from what I've heard that we have anywhere near the kind of information to authorize that final level of spending. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael Spilo to be followed by Adam Leader.
I'd like to reiterate that I support, as well as the others before me, I think, upgrading our rig. I think the process should proceed one step at a time with the opportunity for the RTM and everyone else to understand the scope before we rush to complete the design. We really don't have a sense of what's involved now. Thank you.
Adam Leader to be followed by Beth McGillivray.
Yeah, I'm going to pass. I agree with what Mr. Spilo said. Thank you.
Beth McGillivray to be followed by Brian Rainey.
I'm passing too.
Brian Rainey to be followed by Carol Zarilli.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My points have already been made as well.
Carol Zarilli to be followed by Don Sylvester.
Hi, I'm going to date myself for a moment. I was at the original ribbon cutting of the Hamel rink. I hope to be at the next ribbon cutting, but I do believe the project has the 30% design. I believe we should hold off on giving the rest of the money until we know exactly what it entails. The access road, sewers, the baseball field, redo, all of that project talk has not even been considered in the $17 million. So we need to wait and see what's next, what the design brings us, and cost, etc. Thank you very much. I'm voting for the cut.
Don Sylvester to be followed by Brooks Harris.
Could you ask him to raise his hand?
Don Sylvester, could you please raise your hand so we can locate you among the attendees? All right, let's go with Brooks Harris to be.
5 points have been made.
All right. Mr. Sylvester, if you could somehow come to our attention, we'll come back to you. Mike Brescia to be followed by Dean Gamanos.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm opposed to the proposed plans for the ice rink. We do not have all the information for the total cost. Current costs do not include any costs associated with the building outside the rink itself. There's plenty of neighborhood opposition, and the committee has only met once. And as for the committee, many for or against the plan believes a conflict of interest for Bill Drake to be on the Hamel Commission and also vote on the BET. We request that Mr. Drake recuse himself from any votes on the BET in regards to the rink going forward. I urge everyone to vote yes on the proposed reduction. Thank you.
Dean Gamanos to be followed by Andrea Carson, Boz. Hassan, Boz. All right, so Dean Gamanos first. Dean, could you unmute yourself, please? You're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, you muted yourself again.
How about now?
Good. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, members of the RTM. I served with you guys for 3 terms, and I love what you're doing. I think this situation has to be aired out a lot more. And I've been living in Greenwich for 20 years. I also am a member of the Byron Vets and the American Legion because I'm a Navy veteran. And I can see why everybody wants to get moving with this thing. It's been going on for years. I think finally they've agreed to put it in Byram where it should belong. I don't like the recent proposal, though, to move it probably 50 or 70 yards into the Memorial Park. It's a beautiful park. I think the residents of Byram like to go there. It's tranquil, it's bucolic. The trees are tall. Yes, the plaques will probably remain where they are, but they will be overshadowed by this huge building if they move it to that location. So to me, it's a simple decision. I'm surprised it's moving in the direction of requesting so much money. It should not be spent right now. And you know, there are issues like the flagpole, which isn't a big issue, but it used to be in a nice spot where crowds could gather around for ceremonies. Now, if the building is moved to the proposed recent location, I know there have been a lot of plans and there are many, but one that seems to be favored is to move it in a place where the flag would be squeezed in between the fields and the building. So to me, it's obvious. I hope it is to my former fellow members of the RTM. Thank you.
Andrea Casson Boz.
Thank you. My name is Andrea Casson-Vaz. I'm a District 4 RTM member, and the rink has been a huge part of my life for about 18 years. I'm also the president of the Windy Hill Figure Skating Club. We're a U.S. figure skating sanctioned club, and we're one of the rink user groups. And I'm speaking tonight against the motion to delete the $900,000. I'm gonna have to go really fast now because the time has been shortened. Anyway, through contacts made at the Hamel rink in the Learn to Skate program, my daughter had the opportunity to join the Skyliners Synchronized Skating Organization. She skated with Skyliners on different levels teams for 7 years, finishing her final season as a GHS senior with her team winning the national championship in their division. Many of her friends and teammates who started out just like her in the Learn to Skate program at Hamel have gone on to skate at regional, collegiate, national, and international levels. I know this to be true as they are the skaters who attended the Windy Hill Friday and Saturday freestyle sessions for years. Many of them have also worked at the rink as instructors in the same Learn to Skate program that they all began in. I know a similar story can be said for the many hockey players as well. I can think of so many young people for whom ice sports have been an integral part of their development and have helped them find their voice, their confidence, their personality, and their path to adulthood. The rink is a valuable town resource that provides recreation and fun and safe social interaction for Greenwich children, teens, and adults. Plus, it can be a tremendous source of income for the town once it's improved to become a full-size rink with modern upgraded facilities that can be run year-round. Demand for ice time is only growing all the time, especially in our area. And there is no plan, nor has there ever been a plan to destroy, diminish, or minimize the memorial or the trees that honor fallen town veterans. In fact, I believe that an improved rink with better parking and access to the entire site will only enhance the memorial site and bring more attention to it. Veterans Affairs are very important to me, as my son, former hockey player, he is now 24 years old, is currently serving in the Connecticut National Guard on active duty, serving our community as part of the COVID-19 response. Please vote no on the motion to delete the $900,000 for the rink improvements. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That is our final speaker. So at this point, I will ask our district tabulators to poll your delegation. This is the BOC motion to reduce the DPW account 956-22329 Hamel Rink by $900,000. If you are in favor of that reduction, you vote yes. If you are opposed to that reduction, you vote no. We will take our 5-minute time recess so that the vote can be conducted. All right, we are back. The voting is still underway. We are going to continue. We are on page, we don't have the result, obviously. We are on page 11. 345 DPW Building Construction and Maintenance, 380 Fleet, 440 External Entities, 680 Board of Education, 701 Greenwich Library, 822 Parks, Playgrounds and Fields, 829 Trees, 833 Beaches, 834 Harbors and Boating Facilities, 999 Fixed Charges, Sewer Maintenance Fund, 361 Sewer Maintenance, 361 Sewer Improvement, 450 Nathaniel Witherell, 670 School Lunch, 219 Parking Services, 318 Traffic Engineering, 317 DPW Highway Parking, 824 Grip Harris Golf Course, 131 Other Post-Employment Benefits, 131 Retirement, 187 Shellfish Commission, and our last 834 Harbor Management Commission. All right, that is all of the appropriations. We'll now consider any proposed changes to the language of budget resolution. Mr. Bergwegger, does your committee have something to offer?
Yes, we do. The second paragraph of the grants and receipts resolution refers to the Griffith E. Harris Gall course. We move to correct the spelling from Gall to golf.
Could you just tell us the page? Could you tell us the page in this operative document, please?
Sorry, it's page 23.
All right. And which paragraph?
Paragraph number 2.
We're adding F. All right.
We're putting an F on the word GOL.
All right. What else?
And then and our vote on the resolutions as amended was 1200.
Anything else?
No.
All right. Any other proposed amendments? Okay, so at this point, we need to await the result of our pending vote on the Hamel motion to reduce. And then what we will then do, once we have decided that motion to amend, we will take a vote on the budget as amended.
Oh, Mr. Moderator, excuse me.
Yes.
I misunderstood your request. We also have a change to the additional provisions resolution.
All right, what page is that?
That's page 34.
All right.
These are Scrivener errors. as was the first one. The additional provisions as it appears in the call shows words to be added by underlining them and words to be deleted by bracketing them. And in the first paragraph, the words Board of Estimate and Taxation is defined as BET, and that's fine. But then when we get to the whereases, they do not use, they're inconsistent use of these words. So our motion is in the whereas paragraph and all the following paragraphs, wherever the words Board of Estimate and Taxation appear, including a fraction of that which appears in paragraph C, change that to BET. This vote was to prove that that way was 12-0-0.
All right, anything further?
No. Although we did vote on the bonding resolution as well, but we didn't change it.
All right, so there were two proposed Scribner changes, the correct spelling of golf and then the BET references.
Yes.
That motion to amend is now before us, having been offered by one of our committees. We may adopt it upon unanimous consent. Is there any objection to those, to that motion to amend? Hearing none, those changes may be adopted upon unanimous consent. All right, so as I was saying, we are going to take two votes. There is a bonding resolution that begins on page 36 of this operative document. After we get the result of this pending vote, we will have to adjust the amount of that. Roland Geiger, our budget director, is going to make sure we have the correct number to put in that bonding resolution, but we'll vote on that separately. Everything else we will take a final vote on. And in order to pass, that vote requires a majority of those present and voting. The bonding resolution requires a majority vote of the membership, which is 116 or more. So that is what we will do as soon as we have our results. And again, I want to echo the thanks that you heard from our moderator pro tem to Kimberly Spezzano, our assistant clerk. We welcome back Carmela Budkins, our town clerk, tonight. We're great to see you, Ms. Budkins. Kimberly Spezzano has been doing an unbelievable job for us, as you know. It's been remarkable, and we are very grateful for everything that she has done. And it bears repeating. She works around the clock. Whenever we need her, 7 days, she is there and gets things done and maintains our website. It's a wonderful resource. And then our tech team, we have Craig Jones, who's been sitting this entire meeting on the floor because he is at the controls and he had to plug in with his Ethernet cable. The Wi-Fi was not reliable. And he has been patiently sitting on the floor, making everything go and putting up the clock and whatnot. As was alluded to, we've had these preparation sessions, and Craig has been there, Kimberly Spezzano's been there, and Jenny Larkin, who is also at the controls here, elevating people and allowing people to speak. And we're grateful for that technical expertise. You know, this hybrid is not an easy thing to do, to try and get the sound so that there's no feedback and you can hear us out there. And they finally figured out how to use the smart board to make the experience one that was actually great to have everybody here. And I think those who are present enjoyed the in-person gathering. We have our result.
I'm waiting on 3, but there might be a problem. I can't send to the text, so I don't know.
All right, so we're waiting for the vote from District 3. We have a limited ability to communicate with the district tabulator. So if we could get that vote somehow.
pass without them?
Pardon?
Would it pass without their votes?
He's a panelist, so maybe.
This is Mr. Rubin. Steve Rubin, you're a panelist. Can you tell us the status, please?
Yeah, I sent it a long time ago. I just resent it.
Can you
I sent it after 2 minutes.
Thank you. Could you just read the results? Please?
It was 9 yeses, 0 nos, 1 abstention.
Thank you. We have a result of the vote on the BOC motion to reduce the Hemel Rink appropriation by $900,000. Those in favor, 111.
Nope, 120, sorry. 120, 80.
Hang on a minute. All right, that was the 9 from District 3. All right, so those in favor, 120, opposed 80, abstaining 9. The motion to delete has carried. Pardon? Abstaining 10. All right, so that vote again, 120 in favor, 80 opposed, 10 abstaining. So that 900,000 motion to reduce has carried. All right, so we made all 4 changes, is that right? All right, so we adopted all the 4 motions to amend. As amended, we are now going to vote on item 3. This does not include the bonding resolution, but everything else, the appropriations and the budget resolutions up to the bonding resolution. So will and again, I repeat, our obligation is to adopt a budget by May 15th. So we need to have a majority yes vote on this for the changes that we just made to take effect. If there were to be a majority no vote, that would be interpreted as failing to have adopted a budget. And as a result, the BET's full recommended budget would take effect pursuant to the charter. We have with us Amina Ahmad. I thank you very much for joining us in person. It's reassuring to have the resource of the law department here with us, and I thank you for your patience and sticking with us. And I'll just ask you, do you want to say anything on that issue, or do you want to confirm that that is in fact the case?
That is.
All right, so Amina Ahmad, Assistant Town Attorney, has confirmed what I just told you. So at this point, I'll ask the district tabulators to mark your voting cards. Item 3, budget for fiscal year 2021-22. As amended tonight, proceed to poll your delegation. We'll take a 5-minute time period for that vote, and then we'll proceed to vote on the bonding resolution, by which time we will have the correct number, the amended number for the bonding resolution. All right, we have the result of the vote on item 3, the budget as amended for the next fiscal year. Those in favor, 147, opposed 64, abstaining 3. That item has carried. We now will take up the the bonding resolution with an amended amount. This is on page 36, and I thank Roland Geiger, our budget director, for giving us the corrected number. The number in the resolution currently is $56,741,000. That is to be reduced, if my calculation is correct, by $1,575,000. And so the number that we are replacing it with to reflect the cuts that have been made tonight is $55,166,000. That is 55,166,000. And we see that, I believe, in 2 places, one in the title at the top and in section 1, 3rd line. And if there are any other places, we'll make that change there. So again, pursuant to the charter, the bonding resolution must be approved by a majority of the membership of the RTM, which is 116 members. Will the district tabulators please mark your voting cards? Bonding resolution as amended. And please proceed to poll your delegation. We will need to await the final tally on this before proceeding to adjourn. So we're just going to play some music. We're not going to put up the timer. This is our final business item for tonight. All right, we have the result of the vote on the bonding resolution. Those in favor, 193, opposed 6, abstaining 7. That bonding resolution has carried. Again, thank you all for coming out tonight. Have a safe trip home. This meeting is adjourned.